What's happening? Benton here, going live from my room earlier than normal. It's 5:53. Perhaps it's to what we would owe one moment as I'm hearing myself in my own ear. Um, Whatever I was saying, perhaps that's the reason for the ASMR. Trying to talk all proper and smart alecky, as it were. Is the Tedic Warrior on vacation? Last I heard, he said he was taking a week off, a digital detox type of thing. And shout out to Moose here. This broadcast has been painted over by the Golden Moose. May my broadcast be filled with donations, lots of love, and many viewers. We're vibing high indeed. And in fact, I was catching up on some Paul Enslaved, since that's one of my favorite channels. Proper instruction motivates people, to be more clear. And apparently, Moose has broken bad yet again. That's the narrative over at Mr. Unslaved. Uh, I ended up finding this to be a very, very interesting and compelling discussion, especially as involves our boy Tom here. Um, and I myself, selfishly, in the past, have been desirous of Tommy and Paul working together, if I may speak in those terms. What's up, Musical is a Secret? Welcome back to you as well, sir. And I'm realizing that my connection is not going to allow me to play these pretty much any screen shares. Of course, I could wait another 3 hours for the library to open. What's up, Woody? Good to see you, brother. But as we anyway, there's the link to the broadcast in question. I'm seeing now that my connection's just not going to allow for much of anything other than me talking uh, and addressing you fine folks, to be sure. So I guess I kind of tricked myself into going live by saying that I would play uh, this Paul Enslaved and respond to it. But now I'm seeing that I don't think my connection is going to allow that to happen. So do I have anything for the folks? And then, realizing that uh, Z is normally live, so perhaps people are looking for a place to wander over to. So uh, perhaps I will resist the urge to pile and heap a bunch of pressure on to myself in this moment, and we'll just kind of see what happens. How about that? But yes, thank you, sir. Welcome back. It's a hang, to be sure. We're just hanging out. Oh, as much as I would have liked to have waited later in the day, I had the first heaping helping of the beef stew, which was quite good, I must report. I threw in a couple of egg yolks too, as well, certainly. But yeah, all's clear on at least whatever that amount of beef was in one sitting. I'm necessarily pacing myself. But yeah, back to Zetetic Warrior. Uh, is Zetetic Warrior on a digital detox? Let's do that. Content vacation. And as far as the thumbnail, your guess is as good as mine. I must have been in a hurry. But that was I screenshotted that for whatever reason in the proper aspect ratio. So who knows? That's that Thug Rose from the MMA. who also looks just like the FedEx Bang Bang person from a few years ago. But what's up, Woody, man? Good to see you. Anything on your mind? I'm probably not capable of too much in the way of high level intellectual or pseudo intellectual discourse. However, when I was still clear headed, meaning not under the influence of synthetic cannabinoids, uh, what would have been last night for many folks, right around midnight, I noticed the synapses were firing pretty well. So I'm certainly looking forward to uh, transitioning off of the synthetic cannabinoids and then, back into being of some use with respect to uh, those of us who may prefer or at times choose to deal with our social isolation, our particular flavor of social isolation by engaging in intellectual or pseudo intellectual discourse. The pseudo is mainly there for my own benefit, of course. It's funny though, realizing that on some level I've wanted to do more just me talking, icon only, audio only, and then if someone joins the broadcast, I'm seeing now that I'm going to become less and less patient with people. Um, it's interesting the podcast format. I was able to enforce a somewhat strict podcast format in the past. And in fact, Tommy, the very first time he came to this channel, perhaps because he could tell that that's what I was looking for, at least in that moment, we had just a proper, almost broadcaster to broadcaster podcast style back and forth. And again, I did enough episodes of Nightmare Dystopia audio only, where even highly suspect was able to, and I really hate that I'm seeming to pick on Mr. Suspect, and he's a very hardworking individual. In fact, he's starting his new job, so I've failed in my. This is where we get into Benton as a bad friend. I completely spaced it because it's not important to me. Like, yeah, as a human, I realize that, but it's also to me when I'm starting a new job, it's not exciting. I went back to truck driving at a certain point several times on the broadcast, and there's a lot of like, "Oh, good luck with your new job," or "Oh, you got it." It's like, yeah, it's truck driving. They just hire you. Like, if as long as I meet the requirements, there's no like. Although that's not exactly true with this last job. There was certainly a bit of if I was too weird, they would have probably told me to hit the bricks. Once I showed up in person, but even that's unlikely. Mm. See how he rambles. Maybe I'm just here to watch the ramble. Moment of clarity. The problem, Woody, is I'm losing the ability, especially the cannabis certainly finishes it off, but I'm, left to my own devices or even in my best moments, I'm losing my ability to sort of track my own bullshit, or maybe I don't even care to anymore. I'm enjoying my remaining time, which I'm starting to see now at the risk of sounding egoic or arrogant, but I am those things in many regards. So who cares? But and Paul himself, part of what sort of got me out of my malaise or my funk to even do this broadcast was Paul said something that I heard and now I've forgotten, of course. And this is exactly what I mean. The ability to actually, is this ADD, which I've never had, but is this what I've degenerated into, right? And certainly the cannabis or the cannabinoids play a large factor, but not the entirety. It's certainly present. Uh, this just makes it more difficult. Clearly, certainly fought through this on the walk and talk, which those are now starting so early. Is that just going to have to make that Sunday night? Even though I've been asleep, it's technically after midnight. Is that how that goes? But aren't there like late night shows that start at midnight, but they still treat it as if it's like, Friday night, right? Even though it's midnight, or in this case, Sunday night. Your thoughts? Oh my God, Woody, please. Yes, sir. Woody. Yes, sir. Indeed. I'm having trouble even. and I'm not set up for, I'm clearly not lacking motivation generally. I think this depression label is not very helpful because it's like, well, I'm having no problem. Um, oh, that's not exactly true, but I'm able to make myself do certain things. So, am I picking and choosing what to view as important when realistically, none of it, Woody, is going to amount to a hill of beans, to be sure. Um, I wish I could remember what Paul had said something, Mr. Unslaved, that I wanted to sort of respond to. I found very interesting. Um, must have had something to do with people or psychology, but anyway, perhaps it will return. Maybe I'll train myself to just say the thing out loud as soon as I think of it, whether it makes sense or not. I know I was starting to go in on highly suspect to some extent. Although I do know, you know what? Now that I think about it, if this was the actual, because I haven't been listening to Zetetic Warrior lately. Um, I am a fan. I do tune in, but for whatever reason, I haven't really been listening to anybody's broadcast. Me even catching up on the replay of Paul from last night is somewhat unusual. So um, a little bit of Bex here and there, but mostly been the screen capping though. And I don't have everything. I think it's easy for people to just assume, oh, he's got the entirety of. No, I just have what I've screen capped, here and there. But I'm starting to go in on highly suspect, and then oh, me being a bad friend around, but I really don't care, and it's not. I mean, I'm sure he's well qualified. So, but perhaps it will be a. There's always an opportunity for a new beginning and approaching, certain, work relationships differently. And he seems to get involved with a lot of buddy, best buds on some level with some of the coworkers anyway. I don't even know what I'm talking about now. Well, that's a good question, Woody. I think there's a lot at play there. The thing is, with something like screen recording, since I'm dependent on just the motel Wi-Fi is effectively free, right? It's so congested and diluted. It's me screen capping across the room at 240p is not going to affect anything realistically. And if it doesn't, if just the connection craps out, it's amazing though how that manages to. I screen captured like 7 hours the other night, and I don't think it stopped working one time. Um, so it's interesting to see how these networks function in many regards. That as far as what I'm doing with the StreamYard and the broadcasting and the live streaming, it's really the upload. Realistically, that's the from a network standpoint, that seems to be the thing that there's a lot of struggle with in many ways. But there's a lot there, Woody. I would say it there may in fact never be a value like that's. It may nothing come of it, but then again, we're still talking in the context of my own entertainment, and we're also speaking in the context of none of this is going to amount to a hill of beans outside of my own potential uh, entertainment. Although that is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek exaggeration anyway, because again, I am able to somewhat effectively deal with my own social isolation, and I know that's probably is that even getting annoying, but that I keep mentioning that, but I think that is an anchoring point for much of what's happening. So when I'm listening to Paul and Tommy have this a very interesting conversation, sort of working out some similar dynamics, arguably. Um, I'm viewing it through that context of, well, it's nothing is going to come out of this anyway. I understand that, some of what's going on in some areas with respect to, a certain number of live viewers and donations and all of these things, some of that is tied to, certain ideologies. In my view, this is speaking only for myself, a lot of that is connected. I would believe, I believe I have reason to suspect or again, deductive reasoning that much of the audience, but not all, but much of the audience for those broadcasts does in some way believe in, let's improve ourselves in order to uh, reform or revolutionize the system, which I don't believe are things that can happen. And I also understand that people like the Robert Escobar show, when I was observing his broadcast, um, for them, for people like him, it seems like a foregone conclusion that, well, of course, this realm can be made into a quote better place. And, of course, to him, it's a foregone conclusion, right? I'm here to say that I don't, as far as I'm concerned, that's not a thing that can happen. And I'm not concerned with how that makes me appear to people around me. And um, that's just the reality. And I've known for a long time that with my the way I come across and the way I talk to people, that yeah, I've had at times many people would come up on the panel over here. Oh, and I wanted to talk about the podcast, the one-on-one format. I want to get back to that, the audio only, but I know that if I'm shitty to people at a certain point, they're just not going to want to come, or it's just becomes intimidating, to some extent. We don't know when he's going to start going off on us, right? And I would say there the best defense is a good offense, um, or individuals could address the things within themselves that they haven't addressed, which I would say is the entire basis for any and all notions of making the nightmare dystopian beast system literal hell realm, slightly less nightmarish than it, otherwise is. Because we're certainly not talking about making things better, Robert Escobar show, because that implies that things are somehow good. Now they are, of course. This place is wonderful and awesome and beautiful and fantastic and you know enthralling and everything, all of that in a bag of chips. But it's simultaneously just you know nightmarish, horrifying, painful. All life is suffering to some extent in some regards, although obviously that's not even true. Um, all of these various dynamics, right? But I don't think the very nature of the place is well, things are okay and let's make them good, right? To say make the world a better place, to me that is mind control, that is psyop, that's programming, because that idea certainly does not hold up to scrutiny. So you're suggesting to me that this is, I might even be willing to accept that the realm itself is actually perfectly balanced between good and evil. And then, we, the individuals, through the subversion of creative force and all of these things, are creating the dystopia. Even then, that's still, where do we go from there, right? And I feel like I'm making my point. Whereas it seems like maybe I'm unbalanced towards viewing, well, I'm calling it a literal hell realm. So if I'm unbalanced, it's clear which direction I'm unbalanced. But then are these other folks just as unbalanced to the positive side? So much so that they just take for granted that even as they know, and they themselves will cite the myriad of news items about, how bad the economy's been. By the way, all the stuff that's been true literally my entire life since, the mid 70s at least. And I realized I never fully read the Bex Factors super chat. I never read the whole thing. So it had something to do with storytelling artists or something. So yeah, I'm supporting content creators. So yeah, thank you again. What's up, Yurt? Yeah, I think there's a hole in the morning. I was almost emailed you, sir, to see if you wanted to go live. Certainly welcome to come up here and share any of your thoughts anytime. But that's a standard standing invitation for the Yurt fella. Now I get to fanboy a little bit. Yeah, the yearly Moose Break Bad event. That's like seasonal, right? A little earlier than last year. Okay. Yeah, portends a long, cold winter season. Indeed. I see what you did there. I should just read the entire comment before I start trying to dissect it. Yeah, very well done. I see what you did there, sir. Yeah, and thanks for some of the compliments on some of the visuals on the channel. Thank you, sir. Not that it's any highfalutin, It's just something there, right? I'm only comparing to no aesthetic, right? It's like, well, there's an aesthetic. How far we want to get into the merits thereof, but yeah, I certainly would not consider myself a visual artist per se. Big fan though, big fan of visual arts. Always happy. What's up, Cleveland? Oh yes, OTW News. Yeah, I don't know if OTW is planning to go live. I probably won't be on too long. Been doing shorter shows lately. Although some of them go long, clearly. But yeah, what's up, man? Good to see you, bro. OTW News in the house. I think I'm too stoned to drop links right now. Yeah, it's getting bad. I'll bump it up against the THCO. Definitely can put one down. So that's pretty much happened by like 4 p.m. pretty much every day. So I think at this point I can only really realistically just ride this thing into the ground. So fortunately, I've only got 2 more vapes, so that's good. Although if I manage to get control of it, they sure would be fantastic to save them for after the tolerance break. Although maybe I'll be busy. I don't know. We'll see. Interesting times to be sure. Oh, he's working. Okay. Well, I might just sit here and talk then. Who knows? When I start roboting, I guess just type robot if y'all would into the chat, because if I stay live, that's definitely going to happen. And I need the hotspot data for my own web browsing. Actually, I don't even want to use it all on the broadcast. Before I had the Mint Mobile as well, so that was 5 gig hotspot, and then they doubled it to 10. Man, I missed some opportunities to optimize some of my decision making in the past. I missed some opportunities to be sure. But again, one of the reasons I chose not to do some of the things that I could have done was to prepay for like an entire year of service that then one may not, in fact, actually need. That's a luxury to be sure. But then I'm like, do I really want to bet that I'm going to use this? But I think probably looking back on it, that was a pretty safe bet. Yeah, you will. Because I still didn't know. I know what it was. I still thought I was going to be able to truck drive. Because that's a recent phenomenon. If you folks are not aware, as far as I've only recently reached the state where it's just no longer realistic for me to even attempt to drive a truck long haul. And in fact, just that last 3 weeks, I only drove 2,500 a week, and that was all I could handle. And that's nothing, right? Like that's we average more than that, certainly. And most of these companies want 3,000 plus, if not 3,500. But that's the like the smaller companies. But I don't want to go off into a truck driving thing. So, and I've heard some of Paul talking about the loser failures, and I understand that he's not addressing me specifically, but then because I am self-critical and I am introspective much of the time, I've as he claims that he also does. I'm sort of looking to see, does any of this apply to me? What he's saying about people, and you know who are saying, especially some people that are critical of Paul enslaved, or maybe people he doesn't get along with, or whatever, flow states of the world. And I'll just say it, uh, and this is not across the board. This is more with people who are trying to be content creators, or they are, and it's not 100%. So I shouldn't even say it, because I'm if I say what I'm about to say, there's too much potential for people to take it the wrong way. So I won't even say it, but I will say this. Um, if there's a content creator, although I can't actually, even I am unable to generalize. Wow. Did we ever think that day would come, Yurt? is as adept and effectively as I may use the binary and certain generalizations and sweeping statements. Even I'm not going to be able to do it here, not plausibly. Wow, I think that's the first time that's ever happened. Embarrassing. Moose, I don't care, bro. I don't care. I found it to be an interesting discussion, not because it was about you, Moose. I don't give a fuck about any of that, like at all. 0%, Moose. And meanwhile, I always judge based on my read of the person. Uh, all of this now, of course, some of that can be swayed by other people's opinions in certain ways, but even that with me doesn't go very far. So, Moose, do you think I care? It was an interesting conversation. This is like me trying to convince somebody that I actually used to. Yeah, it's like, well, of course, I like the pictures in Playboy, but I also read the articles. It's like, yeah, well, of course, the Hooters, the gals at Hooters, of course, you know, I appreciate them aesthetically here, if not in other ways. But I'm really going for the hot wings, which was true at a certain time because I used to eat like absolute trash, and there's some pretty good fucking hot wings, I have to say, or they were, if one likes that style. But Moose, man, court all the controversy you want, sir. Uh, I mentioned it mainly because of the actual, meat and potatoes of the conversation. You were just sort of a means to an end in a way, it seems, in this regard. Well, of course I care, Moose. Yeah, of course I do. It's not my concern, is what I should say. When I say I don't care or I don't give a fuck, I really that's me not being socialized to speak properly in a lot of ways. Yeah, very poor, very poor. Sometimes I'm not saying what I'm meaning. It's not my concern, sir. The drama or whatever you find yourself involved with. I probably feel about it about however you feel about it. To be honest with you, that's probably where I'm at with it. Moose, by the way, effortlessly becomes the center of attention, lest we forget. Well done, sir. Oh man, no, there cranky old man is a thing, man. Cranky old man in the morning is a thing for sure. That's half of the time when I'm going off on highly suspect. It's just my cranky old man showing. I say that the most effective way to deal with the cranky old man is embrace it. I know I'm fucking cranky in the mornings, and it ain't got nothing to do. Actually, coffee makes it worse, to be honest, Moose. My mood's way better when I don't drink coffee. So I love coffee, man. I know you're all in on the coffee. I love it. Even I messed up, Moose. I accidentally bought some very low grade beans, and I bought the wrong kind. This 8 o'clock coffee. Their Colombian is actually halfway decent. The stuff they sell again, Slave Mart. Please, yes, I'm from Arkansas. I'm getting there, people. I'm a man of a certain age from a certain time. Uh, you know, to expect me to fully give up my Walmart, but bit by bit, man, baby steps, please. I'm working on it. Goodness. All right. Thanks, Moose. Thanks, man. And I understand it's natural to, you know, become a little forceful if I'm Moose, and I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. What's up, Joe Moore? Good to see you. Apologies if I think you checked in earlier and I was. Oh no, never mind. I did miss Mr. Zadunich. What's up, man? Apologies, sir. I've been sidetracked. Good to see you, man. And some people kind of make fun of the idea of a roll call or you know, and I've heard some comedians, make fun of that concept, and it can be mocked in a humorous way, certainly, but the people like to be recognized. I mean, certainly, and you know, I think people know when they type a comment, and if that's even who I'm just assuming that is Mike Zadunich or whatever. I do understand that sometimes it's not him, but just generally it's somebody has created a fake account or created an account, and it's actually a human being that I maybe have mostly talked to under a different screen name. Yes, I'm aware of that, but if some people think it's funny that see he just greets the screen names, but it's like, yeah, I'm greeting the screen names, definitely. Uh, but then again, I'm a real person as best as I can tell, and I'm in other people's live chats, and I'm never on their panels, and they don't know anything about me except for whatever I type into that chat. Like I am that person also at times. Again, what I would assert is more or less one of the very base layers of the internet itself. The medium is the message. You know, is it Marshall McLuhan style? Feel me? So of course I'm a live chatter, a beloved chatter. Not that y'all get the Stut Joe references necessarily. And it'll be interesting, whatever, because Tommy's always playing a long game, if not multiple long games. So uh, I would say this is the what I saw last night or this morning watching the replay. That was Tom and Paul like getting along, and to the most probably to the greatest extent I've seen. But and did I make my point earlier, Woody? I'm not sure I completely finished up on the why is Beck's worth capturing. I personally would not be assigning the value to the human, although I do assign inherent value to humans, which is it's if everybody has an inherent value, then kind of nobody does, right? It's like that's a certain way to look at things. It's like if we all, it can't be I can't be still young at 48 and youth be the most prized possession in, our culture, because now we've taken something and we've extended it to where too many people have it. If that makes sense. There has to be some exclusivity. Does there not? Um, and I like when people try to do a thing. Like call me crazy, Woody. And I like when a person tries to do a thing. So I tend to, although I'm sure I don't practice this across the board. I try to, and again, do or do not. There is no try, right? So my one of my disciplines or parts of my discipline is I actually am disciplining myself even as I revert to that form of speech, so that I don't even believe what I'm telling you, right? It's like, well, no, I'm, do or do not. But the goal, right? The goal, one of the goals that I'm aiming for is whatever that thing I was just about to say that I no longer can remember. How disappointing. But yeah, endeavoring to, out of a necessity, by the way, the longer I live, the more I'm convinced that, so-called creative types, whatever, man, sensitive artists, which again, come on, I'm not making it into some high ideal. It's more or less just seems like some folks pretty much need to be accessing various creative outlets in order to, have a proper be in a proper mood and not be medicated. And me myself look at all this live streaming, but I'm not spurging out like I used to. Now part of that's probably I'm not under quite as much stress and pressure, and I can actually get rest. You know, but yeah, it's the whole thing. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's right, Zadunich. And this is the point I'm making. Like, why wouldn't I talk to the screen names as if they're actual humans? Why wouldn't I? If I know that actual humans typically respond, forget about what they like. Again, not my concern. But if I know that humans respond to stimulus and they respond to being to recognition, even if that is on some level a participation trophy, well, yes, they are demonstrating the good taste of participating in my content on some level, and are actually giving at least some value, and potentially may choose to if they, again, let's talk in Mr. Unslaved's terms, if some of these folks, after, maybe not because of being warmly received, but it doesn't hurt, if they then also, at some point, I have to do enough actual content, which I think I've proven over time will happen, if not on a daily basis, at least on a regular basis. I will be interesting on command to some extent, right? It's certainly an up and down to that, as we've seen. But you know, ultimately, this is a vlog, right? I mean, or just straight up audio podcast. But when I was doing an actual audio podcast, that it was episodic in nature, and it was right around one a week, maybe two a week, but once or twice a week, typically. Um, in podcast, people may not even know what that means, but my understanding is it's defined based on the episodic or serial nature, and that's where the RSS feed comes in, which is merely an internet protocol, just like HTTP is a protocol, or one of the protocols, or the main protocol, transmission protocol for traversing so the traffic is routed properly throughout the internet. I'm certainly not any expert in these matters, but I was a computer expert right around the turn of the century, lest we forget. So, yeah, at one time I could, I was an expert in repairing those old rotary phones, right? I mean, kind of what I'm saying here. So, yes, which qualifies me to do not much beyond, I'm just slightly less clumsy with the tech than some of my boomer peers, right? On some level. And I'm a little more daring and bold. I don't hesitate to just say, well, fuck Chrome. I'm just going to run this fucking hodgepodge of fucking ungoogled Chromium, for God's sake. This ungoogled Google. It's Google without the Google. I mean, this is just, you see the insanity and absurdity of what was happening here. But yeah, I'm a little bolder and more courageous in a way. I'll just trust that I can figure it the fuck out. Oh, how do I figure out computer shit? I fucking Google it, like everything else in my life to some extent. Doesn't mean I'm living based on a Google search, but I mean, I've talked about life as art. It's like life is a motherfucking series of Google searches. Good God, what a mess. Anger. That's fucking great. You got an actual LOL out of me. Oh, that's fucking fantastic. That's why if it was up to me, I would I would selfishly want more Woody. See, I would want him on mic. If it was up to me, he would have his own channel doing his own live streams, his own vlogs, his own fucking misadventures, whatever that would manifest it as, right? But it's not up to me, man. That's his deal. So you know, if but I will selfishly say, yeah, my preference is to have Woody in all of the live chats. So that's where I run a little afoul of Mr. Unslave sometimes, who probably is legitimately wanting to has a desire to see people do better for themselves. But you know, I'm happy to again, and I have an actual logical basis for even thinking that way in the first place. I've gone over it repeatedly. There's really no reason to even mention it. Here we go. Interesting commentary. Here in Quebec, we call Walmart Walmart, which means wall shit. Yeah, yeah. There you go. There you go. OTW. I like it. Yeah, fuck Walmart. Well, and at one point, I read a book called The Walmart Effect, and one of the major studies in that book, it was based on a lot of studies that had been commissioned, and Walmart had been studied somewhat exhaustively. And in fact, at a certain point, it was like the majority of Walmart's actual supercenter customers actively disliked the company itself. And I was one of those people. I was like, wow, this is like a real thing, but I love the stores. Now I've recognized, especially as some of my organs and certainly my digestion is way less bad than it was. I mean, that's night and day. Um, certainly. But yeah, especially now that my health is less of a disaster in some regards. Although the chronic issues are, chronic has a specific meaning, right? And then we get into, notions around being debilitated, and I'm now starting to see some of the debilitation. If we look at the meaning of the word debilitating, to no longer be able to be capable of working as a long haul truck driver. Whereas me, the way I approach life is it's a foregone conclusion that I would always be able to do that. And then knowing, well, if the person like was paralyzed, obviously they're not able to. But this is a version of that on some level. But I know how to go live in the streets with nothing, and there's many folks more chronically ill than me who are living in the streets right now. Lest we forget, many. I can show you if the bandwidth would cooperate and if the network were up to snuff. I could show you some. I saw one last night that was just, when I talked about this as my hospice, yeah, I'm being hyperbolic, but this lady literally just is almost dead. Crazy. And people want to say that, oh, the content creators exploiting her plight for views. And I might be inclined to agree to some extent, but I don't even see it that way. I think it's just like, look at what we are as a people, man, or as a society, or whatever you want to call it, a nation. Um, it's ugly, man. But yeah, we do, let people just die in the streets more or less, and we can. It's all debatable around, should people be free to live that way if they choose it? I'm not sure, man. I don't know. I don't know. But then I also recognize a lot of what ends up happening at the level of directing so-called assistance and help towards the homeless, when it comes to housing and all of these things, and maybe even job training, and I have some experience with the job training side of it, that's almost set up to, see if the person is even serious in the first place, which makes sense. I mean, Goodwill apparently transferred like $3,500 in fiat to some truck driving school, right? So I understand that Goodwill is now incentivized to make sure to only spend that money on people who are not going to fuck it off or waste it, right? Or, the worst case scenario is take up a space in the school, that a non-refundable 3,500, and then not finish, right? Yeah, angry Rotarian indeed. All right. Chainsaw Roy Duggan is listening while sharpening the chainsaw. I love that. Fantastic. Jimmy Hoffa was a great American. That's probably true, and I never really understood just the people who are just anti-union across the board. Yeah, of course it's a graft, and of course the unions end up being corrupt just like the rest of everything. They are also one of the fingers, unions themselves end up becoming a finger on Benito Mussolini's helicopter hand. Yes, but uh, if we getting rid of unions is not getting rid of graft, and it's actually playing, it's further strengthening arguably the position of, you know, corporations, large multinational corporations, lest we forget that, even if I'm a shareholder of some of these blue chip stocks or whatever, I mean, me at a level of my own human essence or my own humanity, I don't benefit when these corporations continue to grow and the share price, continues to go up. Lest we forget, folks, Enron was literally the darling of the stock market, and in fact, I believe it was like 9 years in a row was pretty much considered like the stock. And for much of that run, was the company was technically insolvent, or what would be known as a zombie institution. And then shout out to the Robert Escobar show, and him mentioning something about pirate radio. I think he was sort of jokingly referred to his broadcast as pirate radio, and I didn't, or pirate TV, pirate television, and I didn't say anything, but I was thinking, hey man, yeah, my podcast, nightmaredystopia.com. I still have still got the domain, by the way. And when this YouTube money hits, you never know. I'm not saying I'm going to, but I don't know. Maybe I will put a website out, because if that censorship comes back, there's most likely not going to be a Benton channel, or if there is, I'll just know to not even, just keep the channel and don't try to put out much content, right? Probably will be back on a website somewhere. Speaking uncensored. So I did get a kick out of when Moose was emailed me about Minds, because he's like, oh, and it's uncensored. You can say whatever you want. I'm like, yeah, man, that's what I did. A lot of folks are not aware that, yeah, dude, that thing, it wasn't gigantic, but it definitely was influential, and the views were beyond whatever this is here, or more correctly, the views are probably pretty close to what I'm getting here. Although I had more, the monthly traffic was like 5,000 unique IP addresses. So if anybody knows what that would translate into for an audience size, that was pretty much every month for the whole run. Once it got, I wasn't really prepared to just start doing a fucking podcast. So probably the first 7 or 8 are pretty dog shit. And in fact, some of them I don't even have, I'm pretty sure, because I ran out of I ran out of storage at a certain point, and had to start deleting the earlier episodes to make way for the new ones. It's like a 3 gig storage on the web hosting. And a little known secret, a lot of folks just think they have to have some sort of media hosting for their MP3 files, right? But that's for like the Joe Rogan experience. Like these big podcasts, they don't have the option of just like paying for some web hosting that's $15 a month or whatever and doing a podcast. But up until a certain podcast size, these web hosts don't give a fuck if I just have thousands of people downloading an MP3 file through an RSS feed. Although most of it was, looking back on it, was people on their computers because they were locked down. So I was kind of annoyed because I wanted people to listen on headphones like I listen, right? So I was like, why is everybody on their computers? Because I just assumed they were like in other tabs doing other things. But maybe a lot of them were having to pretend like they were in Zoom meetings, right? Like working remotely and all of this, but not really working, because it was a fucking shutdown, man. Like, what was there to do, really? So I wasn't, especially since I was truck driving and I was living a much different life. I'm not sure I quite realized where the much of the audience would have been living at that time. Um, so yeah, it probably wasn't till around the 12 episodes in, maybe, that I kind of hit my stride. So once that got built up and the momentum got going, yeah, it was fun, man. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and certainly could have monetized that in some way, but I was making plenty of money truck driving, so that wasn't really. So I know I'm not solely money motivated or grifting. So, but if I'm viewed as e-begging, I don't really. That's okay with me, man. I've got many, 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 many hours holding a cardboard sign, just straight up begging, like literally panhandling and asking in some way, or at least attempting to solicit donations from the passersby might be a more correct way. Thanks, man. Yeah, Woody, thanks, brother. Yeah, it was, man. I agree, dude. And I was in a much different place emotionally, obviously, but I was sharp. In some ways, my mind was sharper, but in some ways, because I listened to some of those, since I've done this channel, and there's certainly some things when I'm hearing myself going like, "Wow, I don't think that way at all anymore," But that's natural, and my path is progress, so naturally, my own logic, reason, and way I approach situations will necessarily evolve over time. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just not. I'm done going to new. I'm not going to new platforms. Me and Drew. I used to go to Croco. May peace be upon him. I was in his D Lives. D Live worked for me for whatever reason. Guess what? Odyssey just didn't work. I tried it. I have no idea why it didn't work for me. I know that all during the D Live days, when me and Drew were on there doing our Sunday night show, and when Croco was on there 7 days a week for the most part, but he would always disappear for like a week to 10 days. He always did that, anywhere between like five and 10 days. Yeah, that was always the thing with Croco. May peace be upon him. But see, it becomes like a tick after a while almost. But yeah. Um, I remember people saying, "Man, just D Live doesn't work for me," and there was mostly complaining. People were mostly complaining about the visually. It looks like garbage. So, like the first time I went to D Live, I remember thinking, like, "Oh, this is terrible. Like, what is this? Good God, it's awful." And then I remember like Discord just being very. The learning curve was high, but once I learned how to use it, it's pretty much the best thing ever. Like, it's, dude, that's like crack for autistic people, man. Oh my God. Uh, and I cannot be psychologically healthy and be on Discord. So consequently, I'm not on Discord. But realistically, Moose, I'm the days of me adopting any sort of new platform is effectively over. And as much as I'm now actually monetized on YouTube, and I am certain it's inarguably certain benefits have accrued to me personally as a result of doing these broadcasts, and that cannot be debated. But we can get into my own motivations all you want. That's fine. But I will at 100% start paying out of my own pocket if I have the means. And that's certainly going forward there's no guarantee of that. Uh, there's a high likelihood of Mr. Benton here, in some level of destitution in the future. But then, I see people like this Cornelius Van Gogh, who I've showed her channel on here, and believe me, if my connection was up to it, I would absolutely show her channel on the screen. And maybe somebody will hear this and drop her link. That's the channel is Cornelius Van Gogh, 2 words. It's probably at Cornelius Van Gogh, most likely, but VANGO, like my van goes, I guess. Some of these people with their names, man, these traveling names or whatever. But and I don't think I'm even. I see. I'm actually. I'm fucking up because I don't believe Cornelius uses female pronouns. So now it's like, how much of this world am I going to exist in? I'll do some of it, but for me, I'm just gonna try not to say the pronoun at all and try only to say the name. I don't think I can do a they them. Seems lazy. Certainly not going to allow other people to just strictly define or proscribe or dictate my specific behaviors. That would be you know, that would be a blunder on many regards, right? No talk of Z, so I guess that's good. I think maybe I'm inventing some of this crossover effect, and is the reality that whatever these splinter cell, if we can call it that, that's probably not the correct connotation, and now the paranoid folks are headed for the exit. So I don't mean it in that. Forget about the war on terror potential implications. So let me choose my words more carefully. But I think we know what I mean. I think we know what I mean. Indeed. And then something Paul has been addressing is the idea that he's he's noticed that many people are just openly speaking as if Western society, in particular, and the United States, specifically, are going in back into what Yurt's been talking about with this. I think he calls it the sit down, or another lockdown. And Paul's talking about that in his own way. Slaving everybody up again, I think is how he puts it. But I've never left that space, y'all. Now, there are times, for periods of time, I'm not just inserted into that space. But once this thing hit, and this is part of why, like what Woody's saying, because I used to cover the news. Some of the time, I would just cover the fucking news. I would just play like this. I mean, I know everybody remembers these, especially Australia. They were riffing and scatting and bebopping all around the place with their various, the our equivalent of a state governor, right? And I guess there's like 4 of them or something. I don't know, dude. I'm not that well versed in whatever Australia's doing, but there was that Dan Andrews, I guess, and then there was at least that was that Jacinda, but then one of them's from New Zealand, and that's a completely different country. So as Americans, we can step in it very easily and show that we don't really know what the fuck we're talking about. So I don't want to give you, but I think we remember this just cavalcade of fucking, characters, right? That otherwise us Americans would have little to no exposure to whatsoever. And, just the insane, ridiculous things they were saying. And so some of my podcast was just me playing some of those clips, right? Which, let's be honest, man, the climate has already shifted. I think most of us can feel the winds of change or whatever, like we've sensed the winds of change. At a certain point, I used to play my old podcasts uncensored on this channel. I don't think I would even do that at this point. Like, I can't even play my own back catalog. Now we're back to what I was talking about on the walk and talk. Although there wasn't much walking and talking, but on that particular broadcast, but it was about Drew. More or less could not even use his channel for like a whole year. Like, I'm never left that space, y'all. Some of y'all seem to vacillate back and forth, and you know during the time of terror, if we could call it that, or during the fake pandemic, y'all were in that space, and then many of you left that space in a so-called return to normal. I'm still living exactly what I was living when I was doing the Nightmare Dystopia podcast and the so-called gallows humor. So what I believe Woody can account for that many of you are not accounting for is that when we observe that this is what's left of Benton physically, and yeah, on camera it does kind of look good to be emaciated in some way, but the reality is at 120 pounds or whatever I'm weighing, I might get up to 125. Maybe I'll gain the weight of this meat or something. We'll see. But delicious, by the way. Um, the gallbladders is happy, certainly. I love you, gallbladder. You're the best gallbladder in the world. Oh man. But hmm. Yeah, I think I'm making sense. You hear me? I hear me. Um, yeah. So that's all happening, and then and then me knowing that you know what can I do about any of it? Fuck all. But I will keep hammering away and chipping away at my being, right? And in a so long and thanks for all the fish, by the way. So long and thanks for all the graft. The Douglas Adams. Me hurtling through space, the fucking whale, who somehow become aware of exactly what's happening, and that it's leaving one incarnation potentially, and hurtling headlong, with all of the uncertainty and however, disorienting and discomforting and discomfiting potentially, all of that could be right. Uh, and expressing some measure of gratitude for the world it's now leaving behind, right? I mean, that was my understanding, having read literally all of the Douglas Adams that was available up until a certain year, some of which was even recent, because that fella very intelligently, in my view, if that was a real person, continued to put out novels that were pretty much all sold very well, as far as I could tell. And my local libraries got each and every one, and the hardback, by the way. And that was back in the days when Benton would actually go to the new fiction section of the library, believe it or not. Um, and then for many years during my when I was choosing to live in the streets with nothing. Now, see, this is what's going to happen is, see, I've never left the space. So let's give you an example of what I mean. And this is what I called. I did an episode called "Bitten at War," and at a certain point I just realized that like I'm at war, right? And that's what the point I'm trying to make about my physical. That like this is what's left of me, right? That when I say that if this world could destroy me, it would have done so by now, I mean that very, very seriously. That, like, look at the damage and the war of attrition and all of these things that have occurred. Look at how strongly and not even strongly, look at how I've been attacked, and look at how you've been attacked, and look at how your family's been attacked. And this is not a call to action. This is a support group in a way. Not it's not, but I mean, I'm speaking in that context. I'm not speaking in a hey, I'm the Robert Escobar show, and let's all fucking register for the Green Party because I'm freaking the fuck out over all this stuff I'm over here addressing. because I don't believe in taboos. And for me, I would rather just talk about it. It seems like that's if people actually want to loop into problem solving, you know, if people actually want to try to affect change, as foolish as of an endeavor as that will most likely, you know, prove in the end with all of its futility. If a thing's worth doing, it's worth doing of its own merit. I've known that for a long time, and that's an aphorism that may or may not originate with yours truly. Perhaps I've tapped into something, or maybe I read that somewhere. I don't recall, but so when I say that I'm at war, what I mean is that society has collapsed. Society is destroyed, meaning that it wasn't that long ago that I lost my library privileges, meaning that I'm not going to the library when they're enforcing masks. And the last time I tried to go at a certain point, I tried to go into the Garland County Library, who wanted to point a temperature gun at my forehead, and I'm not down for that, man. And I'm certainly not. They might have let me in without a mask. I'm not exactly sure. I certainly wasn't going to subject myself to the temp check, but you know, uh, see, I'm still living in that space. The fact that of late I've been able to go to the library, that's a privilege, man. And part of the reason why these folks that work at the library are that they do have a little bit different of an attitude, in my view, because I think they understand or they've seen now that, oh, this can go away, and we need Benton coming in here Monday through Friday. Sometimes he's here, however many weeks in a row, and he's kind of loud. You can sort of hear him out in the main library, but you can't really hear what he's saying, but you can hear his voice. But yeah, we need these people coming here, or eventually we're not going to have a job, right? But and then we're seeing the beast system more and more. You know, now we can debate the reasons why, but how much predictive programming have us in the so-called truth community received at the level of, you know, being warehoused in these little boxes? The idea of the Japanese and the little sleeping cubicles, and you will own nothing, you will be happy, and then European style austerity, which is absolutely happening in America. They just don't call it that. They know what Americans aren't going to tolerate measures if we just call them what they are. Like, you got to sneak it in on us, or whatever the case may be. Silly humans. Well, there you go. Indeed. Yeah, there's still things that can be done here, right? It's not like but it is, again. Well, let me just go back and finish on the fake pandemic. So I'm not living in a daily reality where the library is welcoming me with open arms, and most of the people are not wearing masks. I will never ever again not live. I will never exist in the pre-pandemic times. So those measures are happening to me every single day, whether they're physically present or not. That's the only way I can make it. I will freak the fuck out, and I don't mean in a dangerous or in a. Um, I just mean I'm not going to be able to function. I'm just not. So what I've done and what I find necessary to do is what is necessary for me to be able to operate at levels of effectiveness in my life, which even that is debatable at this point. I have things I've been putting off. I have things that I just assumed would have absolutely been accomplished during my first month in this room. And now I'm not quite, I'm just at the start of the second month, but pretty soon it's no longer the start of the month, and then pretty soon it's well into the month, and pretty soon it's like, well, now there's 14 nights left, so that's still plenty of time if we begin now, right? And I don't procrastinate. I generally, now everyone does in certain ways, but I adopted a strategy many years ago. If I'm not able to avoid the thing, the best for me, the least painful, best thing is to do it as soon as possible, assuming I can't get out of it. So now I can only really assume that, oh, I must consider some of these things optional, like having my car repaired, or certain items that I'm going to absolutely going to trade or sell at some point, that perhaps I could if I sold them outright, I could more max. Now I have an opportunity to maximize their value that I would receive. The fiat when it is. If I wait too long, I might have to just sort of take what I can get, if that makes sense. And I have lots of stuff that most likely I will abandon entirely. Just like I remember uh, moving from my storage in Dallas Fort Worth, I moved a bunch of my hardware. And looking back on it, economically, there's really no reason not to have made two trips because I had a decent amount of nice stuff, right, that I left behind. But the value of that stuff, again, now we're back to the look. Oh, inflation, inflation, inflation. A fucking jar of it's $10 for a jar of ghee and $15 for a jar of tallow, right? At the Walmart. Anywhere, and it's more other place. Forget Walmart. When I say Walmart, I mean like I'm referencing like the low retail. I don't know that people realize that. Sometimes I'm referring more to like a pricing model, like that represents like that's like going to typically be your low retail, although not always. But so yeah, it's like $20, man. But then the consumer goods haven't really increased, and then actually have gone for a time went to almost to damn near nothing. A lot of these consumer goods because they were oversupplied. Clearly. What's up, Capricorny? Good to see you. And now I've sort of forgot what I was trying to finish up on, but I will never. There will never be a day for the rest of this incarnation where I'm not existing in that space of this system is waging war upon me. That's what I mean by I'm at war. And once I tell myself a thing like I'm at war, and it's like I realized it and then did a broadcast about it. It's like I'm at war. Which I didn't really understand. I did not have the comprehension. Well, I didn't understand well enough. My comprehension wasn't high enough, but it is now. Now I can see clearly that what I meant was, well, this thing is whatever this thing is waging direct war upon me and everything that, you know, effectively everything I could reasonably be, it could be said that I love, right? If that's even the correct way to say that, if that makes sense. Or like everything that I may be known to hold dear, but then how much of that is presumptive anyway? And certainly just the overall swath of damage, just carved directly through the heart of society, all societies, more or less. Whatever that is, that I don't think that's even we've just yet begun to sort of explore that crevasse, right? As I read one of these, someone referred to we're on the edge of the precipice. Well, I thought that's what precipice meant, was the edge, but yeah, the precipice of that crevasse, and just how vast, and then the idea of the abyss. When you stare into the abyss also looks into you, or however that goes. I can never exactly remember. And on and on and on and on and on and on. And then Mr. Unslaved seemed, somewhat open and dare I say vulnerable. Speaking with Tommy, if anybody saw that last night, and then Paul seems to be trying to work out, maybe Paul seems to be saying, well, maybe I'm open to changing my approach with some of these folks potentially. But Paul had sort of initially framed it in like for the ones who show that they have some sort of ability to actually like maybe change their own lives, right? But then realistically, we understand it's the misfit, it's the misfit miscreants or whatever, however he terms that, the actual whack packers, because I think he is drawn to those sorts of people on some level. There's something, a magnetic, it's not just in one direction, whatever that is. But I don't want to speak for anybody else. That's my assumption. I could be wrong, but I probably not. And so Tommy wants to go to the ego stuff, right? And we know Tommy's famously, and part of the reason, by the way, it's part of the reason why I don't really, yeah, I'm happy to have Tommy around here, but if he shows up and I'm just still annoyed with him, it's like, okay, Tom, come back another day. But I see how he'll come over here and it's all, anti-Paul, 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 and the next thing he's they're best buds over there, which that's great. I would prefer to see them working together, and even if it's just to make entertaining content, I think that's a it's a very compelling and interesting dynamic with those two. So believe me, I'm not complaining. I'm a fan of both, by the way. Certainly. Uh, but yeah, Tom's great sometimes, especially for ratings. But we can, if I can't have a broadcast without Tommy's help, I'm not, you know, effectively, I'm going to develop a high enough. My skill will develop to a level where I'm able to do what I need to do more or less solo much of the time, or I'll find something else to direct my creative efforts towards. And that's not a threat. That's just what will happen. Um, well, and I'm my synapses are burned out, slow boy. I can't do the mass talk anymore. I just can't do it. Even the stuff RT wanted to bring up about how disgusting the end of life stuff has been. I can say yes, the end of life stuff was disgusting. I'm just my synapses are burnt. I can't. I have nothing left to give. And the fact that the part of me has literally died, and it physically is no longer here. By the way, like certainly couldn't see my ribs for many many years. Although I am naturally pretty thin overall, but yeah, I mean, literally those parts of me are dead. So I'm at war, and I'll be at war till this thing's over with, because the system, whatever this realm is, whatever this evil is, it has declared war upon me. As far as I can tell, solely based on uh, me just saying I'm aligning myself. At least my goal is to align myself with what's good and what's righteous, come what may. Right? Come what may. So of course, why wouldn't I be persecuted? Why wouldn't I, be most likely, facing living outside with almost nothing again? But that which isn't not exactly true. Well, if I end up doing, what if that leads to successful IRL content? See, what if that leads to me mastering these things and asking ye shall receive? A lot of what I'm experiencing, I asked for. Right? I don't know if y'all there are such a thing as an ascetic monk, right? I mean, I'm not saying I am that, but certainly some of what I've been going through has inarguably, especially some of what I've chosen to subject myself to in the last 15 years, absolutely is definitely asceticism. And I've traveled to a monastery in Georgia, physically traveled there, and got there, and certainly was not accepted amongst the monks, certainly. And it's a long story as to why I even thought I could just go to a monastery, but they did offer retreats. But as we know about America, everything's a business, and because I did not go through the formal, business contracting side, in order to, maybe stay there in a monastic setting and to behave as a mendicant, I would believe would be the proper term to mimic the behavior of a mendicant. But I actually did speak with one of the monks, one of the brothers in the gift shop, of course, because again, everything's a business. So I was certainly welcome to an area where I could potentially, choose to part with some of my fiat currency, right? But I made sure to point out to the and maybe this is just my own cruelty and bully like nature at times, but I certainly made sure to point out to the brother that I was certainly living a much more austere life than the brothers themselves were at that time, and sort of in my own little way, kind of rubbed his nose in it, because based on me understanding that most likely this would be his ego, which I don't even like calling it that, but maybe if he if he struggles with pride, and I don't know that he does, but I certainly have at times. But again, I'm a Leo. You're not going to tell me much about my own pride and arrogance and vainglory, or attempts, uh, perhaps my forays into seeking vainglory. Right? That's a good one. I like that one. Vainglorious. But perhaps viewing himself as better than other people by via his own choosing to renounce certain ugly aspects of society, right? And then me just like, well, yeah, I'm living far more humbly, I think is how I said. I said, yes, I'm living far more humbly than the brothers. But and it's a true statement, and again, I am Frankenstein's monster in some ways because lest we forget an actual religious cult, I was subjected to a formalized process of mind control, part of which was that I would speak the truth with fearlessness. So when I'm there, understanding that they sent this brother out here just in case I wanted to purchase something, right? While I'm standing in here with my gigantic hiking backpack, and I've, certainly whatever's on my pants and my clothing that I've, that is attached itself to me as I was hiking through the woods to get here, right? Sleeping rough and loving every minute of it. By the way, this was during my grand hitchhiking adventure in which I hitchhiked from Fayetteville, Arkansas, all through the deep South, and in fact made it all the way to Dover, Delaware. The intention was that I would finally, for the first time, explore the Northeast as a backpacker, more or less. What a like an urban backpacker. The Americans, we don't have the Europeans seem to they're more comfortable with the idea of just taking trains or buses long distances and then just sort of figuring out one's accommodations when they get there. But then again, there's generally always hostels available. That's certainly, although we have that to some extent here, certainly not, probably not to the extent of the Europeans, but I think you all know what I mean. um, Now, how did I get on that? 33 in the house, by the way. Thank you, R. Pole, saluting me from Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico. I used to be able to say Puerto properly, but my maybe it's the fallout from the bioweapon attack. But it seems like my facial muscles can no longer do that. It's probably the many months of practicing alcoholism, the daily practice of alcoholism. I'm not an alcoholic, by the way. I certainly have practiced alcoholism at times. And I've said many times, it's a person is an alcoholic when they view themselves as an alcoholic. That's no more, no less. No one can foist that upon me or anyone else, to that matter. But we all know a drunk when we see one, now, don't we? EBT. And I've certainly been a drunk, although it's been limited in my adult life. Some folks have spent almost their entire adult life as drunks, and I'm not saying EBT has because I don't know the man in that way. Um, he actually seems to be fairly skilled at drinking, but I'm certain. I would assume that he will acknowledge the drawbacks to alcohol as a drug. Yeah, fucking mendicants. Indeed, sir. Indeed. Oh, thank you for yeah. Get me back onto the monastery. Thank you, sir. Yeah, and and I certainly didn't expect to be. It seemed possible that I would at least be, allowed to wash up and maybe spend the night. Although I was certainly more than capable of fending for myself, as I had done. Oh yes, my hitchhiking trip. So the plan was to explore the Northeast for the first time. Thank you, Yurt. Well played, sir. Bravo. And then for the weather to be conducive to me exploring the Northeast. But so I knew to take my time. Moral of the story: I left Fayetteville in January. It was very cold by Arkansas standards. We were still having days in the single digits for the high, right? That's not unusual for Fayetteville. It is up in the mountains by Arkansas standards, meaning it's at about 1,200 feet above sea level. But yeah, that's the Boston Mountains, technically, and actually the Ozarks also. But yeah, the Boston Mountains, which is, I believe, considered the foothills of the Ozarks. I believe. I'm not from there. I'm not necessarily. Anyway, no reason to get into that. Hmm. Oh, yes. Lovely trip, man. Although leaving when it was so cold, it was not long after I left out of Fayetteville. Hitchhiking was the plan. And in fact, I embarked on an entirely new form of hitchhiking. For me at the time, was virtually none of this was on interstate, although necessarily the very first portion of it was. There's really realistically no other way to get out of Fayetteville going south, but um, sticking to the U.S. highways and avoiding almost entirely all interstate. Uh, and in fact, finding in many of the a lot of these U.S. highways going through their rural areas, that small town to some extent. Although 5,000 people, 10,000 people. Generally, when I say small town, like super center, area large enough to have a Walmart super center. Now we get into why it may make a little more sense why I so effortlessly and easily interface with the concept of Walmart that many people seem repelled by, and I certainly understand it and all that it represents. And it is the personification or the embodiment of many of the what we may think of as like corporate ills, right? Or the things we all know to be just fucking horrible about the corporate system in totality. Walmart certainly encompasses and embodies a lot of that. But and a lot of this is like, hey, where miles or 20 miles this person has picked me up and transported me. So now, and I know almost all of these super centers have a patch of woods next to them. Almost all of them, and they almost all actually are built more or less on top of a water source, or the property contains a water source or has access to a water source. And not all, and then the more we go concrete jungle, the more is not. Now there's not even a patch of woods, although sometimes there is, just depending. But so there's almost always a little patch of woods where I may pitch my camp and go to sleep. And then generally the coyotes are active in the area, which means that I won't have to worry too much about the possums and the raccoons coming looking for me. Although certainly I know not to keep food at my camp. So that's I just don't take food with me when I go to pitch my camp for the night. So whatever I've eaten or I'm going to eat, although a winter exception to that, because there can be, because when the temperatures fall below a certain, now we get into hypothermia and all of these things, and then being able to sleep comfortably and all of that. Um, so I would usually eat carbohydrates on purpose near bedtime for the warming effect, and then also regardless if I wanted to or not, I would generally make myself make a fucking hot drink in the morning, which when I was using denatured alcohol, that could just getting the fire started, could be, just getting the flame going is pretty tough because it doesn't do well in those low temperatures necessarily. But ginger tea, and in fact, eating a lot of ginger tea. So a lot of countermeasures to, being out in the cold for so much of the day and all of the night generally, right? It's interesting, man. But and then to sort of skip to the end of the story in a way, finally making it, to right there, not quite across the Mason-Dixon line yet, but very close, right, Dover, Delaware. Um, you know, we're almost there, and then it got real cold and snowed like 6 inches. So I ended up, um, and it had been very cold in North Carolina as well. And I know I'm all over the place with the story, but a lot of things happened. I think it was like several months, man. I think it was March. I think I got to Dover right at the 1st of March, and I'm bad with times, so I must have struck me for some kind of reason. Yeah, it's a great trip, man. Very interesting. Um, had a great time. Met a lot of cool folks. Um, there's something to that, and what I wanted to say earlier is uh, those areas, 7,000 people, 8,000 people, maybe even less. The strategy was just to walk out of town, and then once I got out of town a few miles, I think people would figure out, well, he's just going to walk to that town, because I would have a sign on the back of my backpack with the name of a town up ahead, because a lot of these country folk, they don't know that they're going east or west necessarily. It's not a they know how to tell. They know which way north is, presumably. They just don't think that way. That some of them have never left that county, right? They just know where stuff is. So if you see the hitchhikers with the east or the west, that's more of a trying to hitch the on ramps of the interstate type of thing. So, but they know that Monroeville or whatever the fuck is up ahead. So, and maybe they're not going there, but they're going halfway. Or maybe I've written 3 names of 3 different towns on there, and I just tear them off as I get to that town, right? And that worked, served me very well. But yeah, the super center was just very convenient and easy. Plus, if I needed to panhandle, generally it's possible to panhandle, although not always. If I had money, certainly I'll probably need something in the super center. Sleeping rough, traveling around, responsible for, providing everything for myself in a way. Although certainly part of that is that, well, there's a thing called Walmart, and they're everywhere in certain parts of the country. Certainly all of those areas I was going through, all the way through Arkansas, actually diagonally. Yeah, pretty much just cut a swath through the entire state of Arkansas down to the southeast corner, into Mississippi, all the way across Mississippi. Had some fine adventures, and that's where it was hot. It's hot down there, and carrying my gear became a chore because of how heavy clothing is, and I was unable to wear my jackets and all these layers of clothing. Yeah, it's fun times, man. Fun times. Shout out to 30 in the house. Not stopped very often. Do not walk the interstate. I don't, because it's generally illegal, although some states such as Oregon will actually allow hitchhiking from the roadway and even the interstate. So if I'm in Eugene, Oregon, and I want to go to Portland, this is how I would get there. Although not always. Sometimes I might ride a Bolt bus. They've got a thing called the Bolt bus. And there's another kind of bus. I forget the name of it, but especially Portland to Seattle, that could be. Yeah, Eugene to Portland. There's got to be some kind of bus. There has to be, but I could just literally walk out onto I-5 like in Eugene, and just usually have a big cardboard sign saying Portland or wherever I'm trying to go, and somebody would pick me up and generally drop me off in downtown. Last time I did that, the last time I did what I'm talking about, the guy dropped me off like near the Greyhound downtown, which is like it's ground zero. It's the worst fucking absolute pit of hell. If you look at those pictures of Portland, and you think, wow, this really does look like the pit of hell. The exact area I'm describing is the pit of that pit. It's the pit of the pit of hell. It's the pit of hell of the pit of hell. It's as deep as it gets. And he was even acting like he might come pick me up, because he was, I believe, a hippie type in his 20s, and I think he was probably meeting up with a gal for some sort of liaison. More power to him, of course. Yeah, Greyhound. Yeah, and the worst part of town in a lot of cities is just the area right around the Greyhound. Just in case, I've met many folks who claim that, yeah, I came here on the Greyhound, and then I went just because it's very exhausting. As we know, most of these Greyhound journeys are long distance, many of them, and it's an endurance contest in many ways. And so some of these folks would then, for whatever reason, which is insane to me, have their wallets in their backpacks. I've never done that. In fact, the reason why it wasn't a complete disaster when my backpack was finally stolen for the one and only time in Spokane, by the way, to let you know, well played, Spokane. Anyway, I don't even want to get into that, but I don't, yeah. Back to the main track, sir. which is probably got to be a sidetrack off of a sidetrack by now. But yeah, Greyhound endurance contest. So then they say, yeah, I just went outside, right outside the Greyhound, and like fucking fell asleep and woke up and all my shit was gone. No, now they have no ID. Some of this is a real thing that happens. Some people are just so dumb and oblivious and just naive and just defenseless, that this is what the realm just at that level, the realm outdoes them and outsmarts them, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. And St. Louis, by the way, as we see, some of these Midwest cities in particular, even Detroit certainly would be the most famous example, but a lot of these areas, St. Louis is a city that the actual like bones of the city are great. Like a lot of these, there's walkable neighborhoods. The way the transit is, integrated. It's not perfect, but it's, certainly compared to a city in the deep South, it's just not, man. That it's very very Midwest, right? St. Louis is, and like the bones are there in a lot of ways. So what we see is that as a lot of these areas have fallen into to decay early, like first. So as we're seeing what's going on the West Coast and in other cities, right? In a way, it's sort of and almost like what we've seen with the Soviet Union and the collapse, their economic collapse in the to kick off the 90s. That was like 90 that all happened. As I recall, 90, 91, whenever. So at a certain point, our America was, experiencing some sort of, and is, and still is, this, whatever this is economically. And at a certain point, Russia was ahead of the game in ways because they had already gone through like whatever their version of that was going to be, debatably. And again, I'm no expert. I've certainly looked into these matters. So that's my understanding. Please do your own research. Certainly, almost anybody who's looked into these things to the same degree I have may very well have a different opinion. And I certainly would not expect people to share my opinion about that. I'm very opinionated, as we all know. So, see if I can get back on the main track, right? So what I would say to anybody is, well, just number one, please realize that generally, the immediate area around just about any Greyhound station is typically like the worst place as far as like drug activity, certain types of robberies. It's just bad. It's bad news. I'm not saying don't go to those areas, and I've certainly spent a lot of time very near the Greyhound in Portland. So part of that, when I say it's the shithole of the shithole, or if somebody says, "Wow, look at that shithole, man," that Portland has become, and I meant that when I told those Fort Smith officers, like I've never thought it was. Why should homeless people be allowed to just take over certain areas? I've always been against that. It's not good for. It's not good for anybody. When I was first going to Old Town Portland, it had not yet been taken over completely. Well, it was an open air. Uh, it was an open air mental asylum. It was that, and probably still is. But now I just have to assume the inmates have taken over the asylum. Back then, there was still some semblance of law and order, believe it or not, or at least the inmates were not just directly operating. You know, the inmates were not also standing in for administration in certain ways. And in fact, they were Portland. Does this sound like Portland to y'all? When I was there, so I went there for the first time in whatever year, and I know I'm kind of off on a sidetrack, but I feel like I need to explore this. Uh, there was a lot of miscreants and a lot of criminal behavior that I was witnessing in Old Town, and then the cops weren't necessarily tolerating it, but they were not effectively dealing with it at the time. Whatever they were doing was not working, and I just had to assume that, in fact, and this was way pre-pandemic. This is certainly pre-pandemic. So I was gone for a period of time because I would typically, most of my Portland time has been in the summer, although not all of it, but most of it has been July or August. I like to cheat. Cheating to me is going to Portland only in July and August, where it's just glorious. Same with Seattle; it's glorious. Whatever somebody may think, like if I think the Florida Keys is some kind of like, you know, just lovely. Everything's perfect and it's relaxing and all of this. Actually, my version of that is like Seattle or Portland in the summer. Although I have also been subjected to a sufficient level of trauma in my childhood to where I do also respond to the chaos to some extent. I don't know that an entirely placid, calm environment would be entirely to my liking or what I would respond to, right? Although who knows? Certainly, these are speculations, as we all know. Yeah, um, I love it, man. I've had a great time. But again, I'm at war. That the system, whatever this thing is, declared war on me and you and everybody else, as far as I can tell. Certainly, those of us who are just going to do our own thing. And as much as I'm probably going to end up capitulating to masking again and all that, like I said, my synapses are burned out. I'm just burnt. Um, I'm not here to say, and I'm just done with well, I never had to do it. And look, some of you weren't going outside anyway. Let's just call it what I'm just assuming. I'm not saying this. I know some folks. Let me calm down. I know some folks really, really did manage to live their lives and never capitulated. That's great. Y'all are better than I am in that regard. But a lot of folks just effectively don't go anywhere. And it's not, they accomplish nothing when they say that they never had to do it. It's not an accomplishment if the person, if you weren't going anywhere anyway and you didn't leave the house effectively. So, and that's fine. I have no problem with if that is a portion of the audience, and I suspect that it is. uh I'm part of my charm, allegedly my glib charm, or whatever's wrong with me, or if some people are insane enough to respond to my Bizarre Presentment Productions presents, by the way. And I ain't engaged in problem solving. I'm not engaged in a process of righteous masculine leadership here. Now, do I embody those traits at times? Maybe. I don't know. Um, Maybe one at a time. I don't know about all of that at once, but I'm not Moose. If Moose wants to, he can do whatever he wants. I may not show up at his mind space to get involved, but I'm all for it on some level. Whatever he's doing with the masculinity, I don't find that to be ridiculous. If that's his way of teaching those traits to himself, great. If somebody else decides to go to Moose School of being a grown ass man at the same time he does, if I'm over here going to Benton School of Broadcasting at the same time as a few other broadcasters, that may include Bex, by the way, that may be part of the value, Woody, is that, it may only be that, look, here's a human that may very well be attending broadcasting school, and it may not be Benton School of Broadcasting, but, more or less attending the broadcasting school at the same time. So, I'm aware of these various dynamics in real time for the most part, although while also comically fucking dense and oblivious much of the time. I'm aware of that dynamic also. It's part of the fun for me anyway, maybe not for y'all so much. I don't speak for the audience. That's the thing, is I am the audience in some ways, in many ways. I don't speak for the audience, as does much of the audience. Also does not speak for the audience. Hey, buongiorno, bozos. Right back at you. Let's delve into crowd work for a moment. Yeah, 33 in the chat, 34 now, but the more the merrier on some level. Yes, but Benton's bizarre. Thank you. Yeah, Nate, I've had people in my real life just, there are people who, for whatever reason, see enough value that they choose to subject themselves to my bizarre presentment, because I'm no longer hiding the bizarre. I'm no longer hiding the crazy. I certainly, part of the American Psycho, Patrick Bateman ethos, part of that is that I can hide them most of the time. I can't. Everyone always reveals themselves over time. So somebody people who know what to look for will spot it no matter what. But I'm referring to specific antisocial personality traits, but thank God no actual disorders. So the Patrick Bateman was embodying sociopathy and or psychopathy. I am neither one of those things, but I certainly have some smattering of some of the, like, the narcissistic traits, but not as a badge of honor, right? Just as like a thing to work within. Like, okay, this is, I must make sure that I don't fall victim to the detrimental functions of all of these aspects. While there are some helpful, there are some upsides to some of that stuff, right? If I'm making sense. And the more that you as an individual, right? And this is when I talk about that I'm a pessimist when you take humans and lump them into groups or you talk about the masses, but I am very optimistic with respect to the transcendent potential of the individual. But that sounds like groups, because it is, because the masses are comprised of the individual, but no, and eventually we get down to an individual. So you see how we're starting out by addressing group dynamics and the so-called masses. By starting there, I'm eventually able to land on an individual, because even when we're talking about the so-called individual, that's already plural, right? So now we get down to specific, discrete individuals, and at the level of privacy and free will, that's not my concern, Moose, but I do care, Moose. So Moose is absolutely right. He said, you do care. Yes, I do. The things I'm addressing are none of my concern. I would assert that those concerns lie solely with that individual, especially based on my contention, and it's continuing to contend and assert that, at least in part, that we are all born into a spiritual war that's seemingly waged in real time and never stops being waged between the forces of good and the forces of evil, the forces of creation and the forces of destruction. Um, and all of those factors, actually being created, collectively through the total output, as far as I can tell, of those individuals, which is still a group or a plural, their outputs of their creative force, which, by the way, I say never lies dormant and always necessarily brings something new into existence, whether we or they or anyone is aware of it or not. And then, in fact, everything I think and everything I do for the entirety of my life actually serves good or evil, or we may say God or Satan, if one is willing to entertain such concepts. And one may not be inclined. And I accept that, and I have absolutely no issue with any of that, with those, in any regard, I should say. What's up, G? Good to see you. Producer Moose with the muscle man. You ever think about, and I'm not saying you've never been to the gym, Moose. I'm not saying that. Let me be specific. Have you ever considered resistance training or weight training or lifting weights? And I'm not saying that you never have. I'm saying, have you considered doing that for a specific length of time in order just to increase your physical mass? And again, I actually found this to be detrimental in the long run. So I'm certainly not suggesting it. I'm saying, have you personally considered it? Because it can be beneficial, especially if a person is able to do it in a healthy way. And I certainly was not able to. And looking back on my time in weightlifting and especially intentionally increasing my own body mass, you want to talk about egoic, right? It's like, well, this is, I got the good stuff so much that there needs to be more of me, like literally, let's increase my size. And to some extent, there are some IRL interpersonal dynamics. There's something to having a physical presence, right? That is a thing. It's not the entirety of the thing, but there's something to that. And not, I've again, I'm certainly thinner than Moose at this point. So, although I do seem to have greater muscle tone, so you might wonder why that is, Moose. But anyway, it is. It's just what it is. What it is. Yep. I'm not here to critique physiques. That's a Legend's job. Shout out to Legend. Not that he listens to these, but I certainly enjoyed many of the folks I interacted with in the old Discord days. By the way, back in them days, somehow the podcast days, Highly Suspect was motivated enough to actually somehow figured out how to join the broadcast through Discord, if you can believe that. So I'm just shocked as to why he doesn't just go buy an Android or just travel to a location that has maybe internet. He was talking about the library, maybe going to the library. Maybe he's trying to schedule something with me. I don't know what he's trying to do. I guess he's working a job. Oh well, here's the thing about weight training, Moose. Uh, uh, if one was to lift weights in the way I did, which is certainly this is what I'm actually suggesting something very specific, which is lifting very heavy weights. But what determines how heavy the weight is, it's determined based on how much can you do the exercise for one repetition. So if it's bench press and you can bench press your body weight, whatever that is, which you probably can't, but it would not take long to get it wouldn't take long at all to get there, right? Um, so whatever that is, let's say 150 pounds. So what would be heavy would be 85% of that. So it'd be like 3 repetitions with 85%, 80 to 85% of your 1 rep max in whatever the exercise is. And then only doing compound movements that, recruit the most fibers and all of that, efficient. But with some explosive movements like hanging clean and presses and hanging cleans, even if you don't do the press part. But yeah, certainly pressing, lots of pressing exercises if possible. That would be one of the exceptions to the compound stuff. Although you can just throw that in with some of the cleans. But I'm not saying you will or should or would or could do any of this. But it's a very specific thing. The point I'm trying to make is that when a person does that, they're off the charts hungry pretty much 24 hours a day. Unless the person just literally has like an inhibited ability to produce testosterone, which is possible, right? But for somebody like me, if I'm living that way, I'm just more or less hungry 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So now it's possible to eat enough food to put on mass, right? Because when the skinny guy says that he can't gain weight, it's like, oh yes, he can. He needs to eat whatever he's eating now, double it, and he will absolutely gain weight. But that now you're looking at 5,500 calories because Moose probably does eat 2,700 calories a day and maintains his weight on that, which is not that much more than what they say for a man is 2,500. But if he's on the thinner side, he's can probably 2,800 even. He can maintain his weight. So you double that to gain weight. But then that's me being a crazy person. You really would 150% increase. And none of this is advice. I'm talking as a crazy person who actually did what I'm suggesting, and in some part, at least, contributed to the ruination of my own organs in certain ways. So yeah, this is a very bad idea. Like, don't do this. Yeah, don't do this. But it's an interesting thought experiment, certainly. Yeah, there you go. And realistically, especially a man who may want to start a channel about masculinity, I'll tell you this, Moose. Uh, a person does not have to be an unbalanced maniac like I was and just go fucking all in, fully commit, and let's do this thing, you know, to the utmost, right? That's my style in certain ways. And I was at the peak of my testosterone and my age, if that makes sense. Like that was the maximum expression. I was like 32 years old, right? Um, Certainly way more brash and headstrong and just arrogant for nothing, people might call it, or just cocky for nothing. Have you ever met those people? I've been one of those people to some extent, just cocky for nothing in some instances. But that was certainly at its zenith back then. Although maybe not for nothing, but I digress. Yeah, so yeah, 6 eggs and uh, whatever else might boost his testosterone, and then just a little bit of fucking heavy lifting. Don't have to go nuts, right? Just a balanced version of what I'm speaking on. You might be surprised what that'll do for you, Moose. Because I think I think people have gotten away from realizing there's something to a man who makes a certain level of androgens. That's just a different thing. It's a different beast, right? And it has to be contended with, whatever that is. Like once the being starts reaching certain concentration levels in the blood, it's like the being isn't gonna be a doormat. And I'm not saying moose is that. I'm just saying the being it isn't going to put up with certain things. Like they are going to sort of stand up for themselves, come what may. Right? It's um, and I myself have noticed it when my habits fell by the wayside, and I wasn't certainly wasn't making normal levels of androgens based on the fact that I normally have high levels. Um, and it's a whole nother thing. I was, I've never would become that, but I was starting to look at some of my behavior and being like, man, I got to tighten that up, right? Because I'll go into that space here and there, but I can never remain there, like a fucking bitch mode almost. But it's like it's bad, dude. Because when I see it, I'm like, no, man, nope, nope, nope. Ain't no future in that, partner. Get shed of that. So that doesn't happen generally when a man produces just appropriate and normal levels of testosterone. I'm not even talking about high testosterone. That's a whole nother thing. Like that's actually almost like a sociological or like a psychological condition almost. If you read about what psychology thinks of that, there's so many negatives attached to a man having high testosterone. It's not good. It's not. I say it like it's a badge of honor. Like it's not. It's a um, there's many benefits, and it is like a drug. It's a great drug. And when I've said before that I'm, at a certain point, especially when I was first learning how to sort of be my own, therapist and take charge of my own mental health, because I recognize, much like I talked about, if I don't program my mind, this realm will program it for me. Same thing with the mental health. If I don't, in some way, uh, take charge of my own mental health, this system, if I fall below a certain level in my ability to function within that society. And as we've seen, it's not really possible to fully opt out of society. Even if I did end up by the living near the dumpster behind the Quickie Mart, the reality is my behavior could certainly cause the authorities to now believe that they have the right to intervene. When I said that stuff about, the list of what the system can compel me to do is it's almost zero. That's only true if I'm conducting my affairs properly, even in the context of sleeping literally next to a dumpster behind a Quickie Mart. If that makes sense. That's interesting. To end up at that seeming what seems like a dead end there. That's an interesting place to end up. Shout out to 37 in the house. Goodness gracious. Yeah, exactly, Moose. Just this is not complicated, brother. It doesn't take much. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. But yeah, I'm not capable of advising you. Those were just general ideas of what a person could do. So you're on your own there, sir. So yeah, it's at the result of at the risk of seeming like I'm just sort of dropping you on your face there. It's like again, you have the internet. I'm sure that plenty of um, plenty of information out there. I used to back in the day. It was supplement companies like this TMag or tnation.com. Anybody ever go to this thing back in the day? t-nation.com. They had some really good articles. I guess they would sponsor these I guess weightlifters, yes. Power lifters. Not like Olympic style, but I'm sure some of them were probably also Olympic style weightlifting. I like the Olympic style myself, Moose. But then that gets into athletic ability. Like I have just a slightly above average athletic ability, so not sure where you line up on that scale. But try not to hold your race against you. Try not to. Yeah, there you go. Indeed, ice grills. Indeed, yeah. Yeah, it's not again. It's not even an altogether good thing. So realistically, I'm just talking about whatever Moose would make normally, like just making sure he's always on the high end of whatever that range is. That's all I'm talking about. So yeah, even 3 eggs. So it's like, yeah, I want to have 6 eggs. But it's like 3 eggs or 6 egg yolks. Actually, skip the. I'm not sure we. I'm not sure the whites are helping. Just 6 egg yolks with a. I don't know. I'm not a cook. Whatever that goes with. But again, I'm problem solving. There's uh, the chord I'm trying to strike here is that I was extremely unbalanced, and I feel like I've suffered greatly in many respects as a result of my own failure to, conduct my affairs in a well reasoned and balanced way. Right. Certainly have learned my lessons. I feel like I've learned what I needed to learn from those experiences. Certainly, I don't know that there's much left to extract, and I do want to go back to the idea of me as my own therapist. I've certainly proven somewhat adept in those regards, where I have been able to sort of serve as my own psycho analyst, and I found it very beneficial. Um, and then I recognized at a certain point, my father, I guess, was in his own Talcottian way, although Talcott, from my perspective, Talcott's like my father, actually, because I knew my father first. And then none of this is to denigrate or deride my father in any way. I'm not, that's not the point. Um, I'm really talking about my experiences more so than his, right? And he's involved in my experiences. So, I've already sidetracked myself. Well, that happens. Where was I going? Somebody help me out. Oh yeah, the high testosterone and all that. Um, where did that go to? If I ever solve this little problem I've been encountering of late, if I manage to transcend this bad boy, I do recall talking earlier about that I'm a huge believer in I'm very optimistic about the transcendent potential of an individual, um, and I am, but I don't see that as okay. Let's go try to motivate those individuals, and then, or even worse, like a Robert Escobar show. Well, let's get them all motivated and then send them over to the Green Party to get registered to vote. Like that's, again, make literal again, but like that's realistically, there's people who want to help facilitate, a coming together, a so-called kumbaya moment in certain in certain spheres, and especially as much of this activity, as much of this human interaction has now necessarily moved into the metaverse. And I'm recalling now. I was addressing the concept of Benton at war in the podcast context from my old Nightmare Dystopia podcast, and that I recognize that now folks are starting to see that in fact we, or society, or whatever we're calling it, Benito Mussolini's helicopter hand is about to scoop us up and just put us right back into the gulag, the soft gulag, when in reality it's been the soft gulag the whole way through. It was a soft gulag, then it got way more in your face and almost with aspects of hard gulag, and then uh foolishly, serendipitously, foolishly way, right? And that doesn't even make sense even as I said it. But uh trying to combine these two concepts, I'm not exactly sure what I'm grasping at, but for people to very foolishly discontinue existing in the space of that war, right? Meanwhile, how much of each human even survived the first battle? If the first lockdown was like if that was the first phase of the war, right? With many battles fought, um, and the war continues, certainly. So I will never exist in a psychological space outside of the context of that war, and I haven't since literally the first day they declared global pandemic. Not one 24 hours period of time has elapsed without me existing at least part of that time in a psychological war that this system has apparently decided to wage against me. And people can say that the Bible's fake and that there never was a Job. That's fine if from the Bible, but that doesn't mean this is not, in fact, Job chapter 1. It seems to me like it is on some level, even if just the symbols are there, or it's just the parts of both stories happen to match up, and it's just not a coincidence, but it's you know serendipity again. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure, and that gets back to the Krishnamurti ideas, the J. Krishnamurti ideas around, you know, him more or less saying that it seems to me like the thing to have is a very flexible mind that's able to grasp and apprehend reality as reality manifests itself in each new moment, more or less. That's my understanding. So, you know, perhaps I've developed those portions of my brain maybe to a greater extent than some other folks, although some folks probably their inborn ability to do that's already very high. But again, my path is progress. I'm always necessarily working on certain aspects of even just my own mentality, which is where, when I'm typing at the Robert Escobar show, which is also an at, because that is a YouTube channel. When I'm typing at him on his live, and I'm like, your thinking is disorganized. I told him his thinking is very disordered. It is. His thinking is disordered. A lot of people's thinking is disordered. Now, is mine at times? I'm sure it is. Like, just like the earbuds got tangled up and it took me a solid 180 seconds to disentangle them. Yes, that also happens with my thought process some of the time. But as soon as I notice the entanglement, I immediately untangle it every time. Some folks never put effort one into any of that, into any disentanglement along those lines, ever. It's never a thing that happens. How about you? Shout out to Aisling in the chat. Yeah, I'm interesting at times, Aisling. I will own that one. So thank you. I will own that one, but not all of the time. Certainly, I will be interesting on command to some extent, but there is a limit even to that. So now I'm even becoming nauseated by my own self-aggrandizement, if that's the correct term, and I believe perhaps it is. So yeah, you wish your dad was like Talcott. Nice. Okay, I'm way behind in the chat, but sometimes that's better actually. I can sort of get to review the material, but don't let me off the hook on this psychoanalyst angle. My father was trying to use. At a certain point I realized that he was trying to use me for uh, therapy, and in fact, I probably am somewhat qualified. So what I realized at a certain point was, well, what would I charge? So if the government allowed it, not that they would or could stop me necessarily, that would be remain to be seen. But assuming I wasn't willing to be potentially caught breaking the law in such a manner, and we can get into policy and code. My apologies. Let's speak specifically here. I don't mean actual law, but the policy and the code, right? If I was willing to go against that, I think I would charge 100 an hour. I mean, are there people who provide therapy services at $50 an hour? I'm sure there are, right? But I would charge now. That's in person. There it might be less expensive if it was done at a distance or virtually, especially if it was done in such a way that it also intersected with maybe some of my content creation. Certainly, be a discount for that, right? But and we are talking about more or less me start beginning to operate more on a transactional basis. That is a real thing, as much as we sort of recoil in horror from the language of the left in many regards. Although, meanwhile, the people who believe themselves to be traditional family values conservatives, and I assert that no such animal exists. Oh, yes, there it is. It's the Amish, but I digress. It's certainly not people who think it's a good idea to identify as a Republican or a Democrat. Either way, right? But I don't need to get off into that. And I just almost made some points, but see, we're not going to quite get to all of that immediately. So maybe I'm learning to sort of just stop and then maybe unravel a bit of that in my mind, as much as the very limited short-term memory will allow. Thank you very much. And we do have a cough button. We'll be back shortly. Thanks for being here. Shout out to 40 in the house. Very impressive. Not on my part, impressive on your part. Thank you. All right, we're back. Although I see I need to get some water. One moment. Let's get some water. Water. Well, and now, as I sit cross-legged on the floor, by the way, I see that I'm sitting in this chair so much that it's starting to affect my lower back. So It's not the chair. I'm normally on an ongoing basis. I spend a decent amount of time, seated Indian style with a straight back, which is a lot of folks are not even able to do that, lest we forget. But let me go ahead and turn this second monitor off since I'm not using it. Actually, one moment. Appreciate 32 in the house. We lost about 8 there for the break, but that's okay. The 40 I figured I was not able to sustain that level of effort. That first hour and 52, I'll put my name on that. Certainly rambled and sort of never quite got to the point several times. But shout out to the THCO, by the way. Is Dow been around? And apologies to any folks I failed to greet. That's another reason I like to do the people make fun of the idea of a roll call or recognizing the live chat. But it's like, yeah, but what about the times when I'm really not able to do that because I'm doing other stuff? I don't see the harm. So apologies if there's any folks that I failed to recognize. It was not intentional, I can assure you. I've checked out to some extent from the chat, at least here for a bit. And then just looking at the amount of supplements, man, just the bare basics of what I'm taking for, the pancreatitis and the bile stuff. Just like a whole fucking box, man. This is like 5 pounds of stuff. So trying to haul this around in some version of sleeping rough, and homeless or whatever we want to call it. Living in the streets, I think, is probably the most accurate term. So it's interesting, man. It's going to be interesting. See how this all works out. It's like, yeah, I'm glad I stocked up on taurine. It was very affordable, but it's 400 grams essentially. So this is pretty fucking heavy, right? That's just what the product weighs. It doesn't even count for the bottle and the capsules and such, presumably. I don't know. I think I need to live indoors, maybe, as much as I'm capable of living outside. I've certainly established those abilities. Where it's not going to be too much of a chore, certainly. And I do enjoy it in many ways, lest we forget. Certain aspects of that will always appeal to me in certain ways. Oh, if I could just be around other people all of the time, I don't think it would be very difficult for me to live indoors. It's just for me to live indoors and still have my space. That's the issue. Now we get into what level of corporate slavery am I going to have to involve myself with to make enough fiat to actually do that? Because probably I'm wondering with the streaming, at least in this form, it might end up being just enough money to not be able to support myself, right? Which is great on some level because realistically, if I'm going to actually be trying to make money online through my content, I'm assuming it's going to have to be some version of IRL stuff. But when I look at a lot of these ones who are actually getting like a high amount of views, they're definitely serving the least common denominator to a great extent, necessarily. So I don't know that I would. It's not even about that I would want to. I don't know that I would do that kind of content as far as doing it so overtly. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it, by the way. I just don't know that I would join them there, especially the more formulaic type of stuff where a bunch of the same people make a bunch of the same style of videos and they all at some point go to the Walmart in Harrison, Arkansas because it's the most racist town in America or whatever because the KKK is nearby, supposedly, which I guess they are or whatever. But that how many of those? There's like 10 different, so how for me to be able to do it and maintain my own interest in what I'm doing versus now am I doing something where, yeah, maybe it can get 10,000 views, right? And then I don't know. Is it possible to make money on that? I have no idea. I don't really know anything about it. Hey, thanks for the super sticker, Monel. Wasn't quite fishing, but we'll take it. Thank you, Miss Monel. Appreciate that. Yeah, there you go. Well, it probably is. I don't know. I don't know that it directly boosts the T. Thank you, Producer Moose. All right, Producer Moose with the 9.99. How about you? Awesome, Moose, and shout out to you as well, Monel. Moose said, "Rock on, homie," and actually, it was a super sticker for Monel. Super sticker. Thanks, y'all. Awesome. And it may be quite some time before YouTube gets around to giving me paying me for the first time. Apparently, after the first time, it'll be once a month thereafter, I believe, assuming that I hit the $100 to qualify, which it seems like if things continue as they have, that threshold would be reached monthly, presumably. Although no guarantee, of course, and no guarantee of a channel. As we know, they meaning Alphabet, Google, YouTube will, here in the belly of the beast, they will absolutely end this channel in the next 5 minutes if they decide to do so, right? So lest we forget, and again, back to what I was talking about me going into a certain psychological space that I've never fully came out of, and I think it's a psychological error if other people have come out of that space but are now and I'm not saying that other people have, but and especially if those people are now recognizing, oh, now society may in fact be going back into some version of the fake pandemic. I think for some folks there really is that, oh my God, it's finally over, and just not even assuming that it won't come back, but just of a like now a false hope of just living on that prayer that it won't come back. And then now it's appearing like it very well could, right? So I do best when I just inhabit that space from from now on, or from then on into perpetuity, or however long this continues for me in this form, where I'm living that now psychologically. Oh, the therapy, yeah. So at a certain point, I was telling that to my dad because he was trying to turn me into his therapist. I was like, well, you know, I could be your therapist, except I can't, obviously, because of the father son relationship would make preclude that. That makes it inappropriate anyway. Like there is such a thing. Like ethics is a real thing. It's not just a joke, right? It's also there's something to that ethically. But I said, yeah, I might be qualified, but I said I charge $100, so like you can't afford me anyway, which is true. He can't afford me, even if it was appropriate, and that may be true with highly suspect also. And I'll, at the risk of unleashing a little bit of my own megalomania at y'all. I do compare myself to very high level people in certain. I'm not saying that I have attained those levels that they supposedly attained, but if I view myself as creative, or even dare I say intellectual in certain ways, or you know intuitive certainly, then of course I'm going to put myself up there in some regard. Why would I limit my potential upside? That certainly would seem like folly, but um, some of these great thinkers, why couldn't I have share a little bit in common with them in certain regards? Maybe not the full attainment. I certainly don't. I'm not suffering from any notions to the contrary. There's no, I'm not delusional. There's no delusions of grandeur. I'm talking about actual megalomania, where I just sort of believe, you know, uh, sort of believe in my own pretty high level abilities sometimes, right? Which may or may not be. It really ultimately, it's to what extent can I bring something new into existence creatively. That's the scoreboard as far as I'm concerned. So, I'm just because I feel like I may possibly be able to do a thing doesn't mean that it's actually ever going to be brought, into fruition, or make itself, or be made manifest, right? Or living, have life breathed into it. We can certainly discuss the potentials, which I am very, again, optimistic when that potential is encapsulated in what? An individual. That's right. But not collections of individuals, and certainly not the individual, because now that's a plural. And the vast majority of people will never, under any circumstances, do any of this introspective. Now, some people will sort of try to tidy up things more on the surface level, and then as societal norms change, and now even my own father's talking about the universe and sigma male and all of this happy horse shit. So people, and again, I've talked about it before. What's the number one feature of the human is adaptation to environment, as far as I can tell. Uh, Seems like that's what the human does above and beyond all else, and just extremely efficiently on any sort of timeline. It seems on virtually any timeline, which is much of the issues that we, meaning society, and the members of that society, seem to find ourselves faced with these various issues, that have been birthed, in at least in part, out of this the fake pandemic. And how much longer will I even be permitted or allowed, air quotes? Yeah, YouTube's happy to allow me in the current climate, but even that's starting to change, where I'm even, but I'm probably not willing to. And some folks would say that's even coded language, but I think it's the most effective way. Everybody knows what I mean when I say fake pandemic. So, you know, uh, so that's a double-edged sword. Like, some folks may not understand that. I really would just prefer not to even deal with the Cash App stuff or the Zelle. It is very inconvenient. The borderline excessive. It's certainly, I would consider it to be excessive, although it's probably justifiable, the high the high fee. But um, part of me, I would almost rather just do it that way, honestly. Then it's all public, everybody can see it. We all experience it in real time. you know there's some appeal there too, right? And then it's obviously, in some way, depending on people's generosity. But what I would say is, you know for me personally, the more I can, if I think I'm going to be able to earn anything approaching a living from content, which may not be the case, right? But um, focusing more of an IRL, even through a different channel, but probably still doing the live streams portion over here, right? Um, but trying to build that up probably through consulting with people who know about YouTube, right? Because I really don't know, and I have almost no desire to learn about how YouTube works. I've picked up some things here and there that I find interesting, but if this is autism or whatever we're calling it, and again, autism, standard autism disclaimer in effect. But yeah, yeah, I think I know what I mean. I think you follow. Hey, what's up, Jay Hyten? Good to see you. Zetetic. Okay. Well, and then, well, fantastic. And thank you for the update. And I was out of the loop. So I recognize now that his regular audience seem to know about this. I am one of the normal audience much of the time, but I had not tuned in for the last week or so. Um, so I know there had been some talk of persons, including me, hosting, the 5 shows during his content vacation. That's my words, by the way. I'm characterizing, or maybe I'm taking a content vacation. I mean, that's another thing. I never said I wasn't taking one, but also I'm not planning one, certainly at this time. Yeah, automated update on Zetetic. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, I'm interested, Christos. I'm also interested. Good to see you, by the way. Shout out to Mr. Christos Day Leopolis, if I'm saying that right. Christos Day. How about you, partner? But yeah, glad to hear it. I think that's a great idea, and I'm also fasting, but that's a whole nother animal there. I'm fasting while eating every day, and it's an interesting form of fasting, but it's fasting nonetheless. Benton needs to tap into a more lucrative truther schizo community, more affluent schizo in need of therapy. Well, that's the thing is I don't know that I even have a desire to. So like with somebody like highly suspect, it's just really just more of a, hey man, if you have specific questions, I probably could answer it. But I can't really do much with actively listen to people. But now we're back to it becoming transactional. At what point am I just like, yeah, man, I got to get $100 because that's how busy I am between the being exhausted and the limitations. These debilitating effects beginning to affect my the amount of time I can be productive in a given day, what amount of time I can be at my best mentally, right, as far as my cognition and all of these things. That's all, you know it's limited. It already was, it always has been, it always will be, at least in this incarnation, it seems, or at least it seems that way right now. We're back to transcendence, but I think you folks know what I mean. But yeah, it's not about a grift or a graft or um, an e-begging. I'll beg if I need to, but you know, let's cross that bridge when we come to it. But I think I've demonstrated that I'm happy to do stuff. I'm happy to pay for things myself just to contribute. If that was the contribution I could offer to the community at the time, and now it's more in the content space, and then if that necessarily involves other people donating to me so that I can keep doing the content, by the way, which again, as I've said, other than entertainment, perhaps will not amount to a hill of beans. So now it's up to each person's own discernment and what do they value and what do they respond to, and is it really worth them investing their energy and fiat into it? And some folks already have, and some people continue to, and some folks never will, but do offer their energy in certain ways. Some, are just trying to maybe just taking in various ways, but it's not for me to operate those dynamics, right? That all plays out more or less on its own, as far as I know. So it's very interesting times to be alive. I'm certainly not trying to get out of here early, but I will say this, folks. I have zero interest in another fake pandemic at the level of mask, jab, the whole thing. Like, I don't even need to describe it. Y'all know what I mean. I have no interest. Like, I mean, I'm done. Like, I'm just burnt. So it's like, if I'm to that point where I'm like, think I'm going to go in the grocery store and they're like, no, you're not. And I don't know, man. I'm just burnt. I'll probably just leave. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what else am I going to do? I don't know. I might go get bolt cutters, and now everybody's dumpsters are getting broken into every night because Benton's got to eat a somewhat specialized diet. And we do apparently throw away up to 40% of the food. So it's certainly, it would be more difficult based on me, more or less having to, in order to cope as best as possible with my issues, I've found it possible and expedient to adopt a very strict, diet, but with some variety, certainly at times. And I'm able to stick to that, unlike most folks, you know. But just that's whatever. Doesn't make me better. It's just it's a difference, right? Lord knows when I'm freaking out or got my fingers in my ears because the ambulance is driving by or whatever foolishness I'm up to. Certainly, the absurdity is not lost on me, to be sure. Shout out to 33 in the house. I like that number. I'm feeling my groove. I got to say that. And I was sort of taking Miss Bex to task and her channel at the Bex Factor with two X's. And Woody was asking, what I guess he doesn't. Perhaps Woody sees no redeeming value um, in Beck's the persona or whatever human, or maybe that's an AI. I don't know. Could that be an AI? Am I just assuming that that's a human when perhaps it's not? I don't know. Maybe is that person is that a voice actor who's also been a voice actor for other. I certainly consider that to be a possibility, but I don't dwell in those spaces mentally because that, to me, that turns into schizophrenic type thinking, and I don't do well. People like Word Wizard, I've noticed, and maybe even 6079 Smith to a lesser extent, because he does engage in the heavy drinking, so he's not as effective as Wizard seems to be. But there are folks, even as Zach Hubbard, although I'm convinced he's an actual schizophrenic who's been stabilized somehow. 1984 and Brave New World, effectively. But there's no person who's not crazy wants, desires, or is willing and capable to spend that amount of time studying geometry, more or less all every. I remember. I know what we're dealing with. Generally. I enjoyed the. Again, I'm here for entertainment, and I don't find anything wrong with saying it just like that. I'm here for entertainment. If I'm providing it, if I'm offering value, if people are finding value in it, great. If not, hopefully they will. I don't know. If nobody ever watches it, if the number goes to zero and never goes to one again, then um, until that happens, this will most likely continue in some form, whether it's vlog or audio blog or um, whatever. Whether or not I can actually bring myself to cheese it up on some IRL channel. May or maybe not. I don't know. I probably have some of the skill set by now to do that. We'll see. I would still prefer some version of a more guerrilla style, and maybe with some of my quirky, some quirkiness at the level of the graphics for the channel and the thumbnail designs and all that. Keep it funky, Benton, or keep it weird, Benton. Whatever that would be. What a freaking disaster. Shout out to 32 in the house. I don't know. I think I'm probably about done. I don't know how much more I have. It's almost mealtime again. What a blessing. I ate so early that now do I do second cup of coffee? Now, see, that's three in a row. So you see how the addiction works. The addiction knows, okay, wait a minute. If he's actually, because I was considering it, there's been a couple of days where I was like, well, shit, I could just go ahead and quit today. Like it's almost happened at least two or three times. So now I think the addiction or the I don't wouldn't call it a disease, but whatever that is, whatever that addiction is like, okay, well, let's see if we can double him up. So at least if he wants to, we know that at least he's not going to quit until he goes back to, 12 ounce dose. But what I'm finding with coffee is, if I wake up super early, like I did, 11, wasn't even 11:30 yet. I don't think I was awake. Of course, I laid back down for a while, and that's some good rest I found. If the cortisol never kicks in, that cortisol feeling. But if I manage to just to get up and move around and go to the toilet or whatever, use the toilet, you know, lay back down without going into that whatever that is, and then generally here comes some version of anxiety or racing thoughts seems to go along with it, right? Um, I seem to do really good waking up around midnight, 11:30, and then maybe lay back down and rest, but get up after that. Hell, I ate at like 3 a.m. and I'd already done 2 hours by then, so I did my first 2 hours, and I'm doing this one now. And the way this is going, I'll be wrapped up by what 10. And I forgot if I was trying to see if Yurt wanted to go live, but I think maybe he indicated that back and forth. But it seems like it will let me talk just with my icon. So I think I'll stick with effectiveness and what is possible with me without me trying to. Again, I'd be waiting another 30 minutes for the library to open. I think we're seeing now it's just not going to work. I'm already too sapped that late into the day. I'm pretty much done by noon effectively. And this whole time I was truck driving. If y'all remember when I hit the bonus, those of y'all that were around when I was streaming and hitting the 12,000 uh, miles a month bonus, 6 cents I think it was, or it $600 was ended up being I got hit that bad boy twice, more or less on my deathbed to some extent. I was definitely kicking the shit out of my kidneys and my other organs with those very strong herbs. I was going all in. At a certain point, my gallbladder was taking it from the Chanca Piedra, if I'm saying that right. I was on some real strong tea, other herbs too. Damn, dude. So, shout out to my kidneys, by the way. Benton's kidneys, the color of the Piznog, the color of the Piz was quite favorable. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. 4 to 6. There you go. That's appropriate for your age, I would say. And there's something about me. I'm realizing that I think realistically I am probably a night person, but and I'm not a Solarian, right? I am if you look at you want to get into the astrology, I've sun in Leo, but I do want to put the sun in my eyes and a little sun on my skin, even if just for 5 minutes, right? So I'm not like a vampire. I'm not vampiric. I'm not opposed to the daytime, but I enjoy the daytime certainly. But something to having my peak of my abilities at around midnight or 2 a.m. I would say I'm probably if I wake up that early, I'm probably peaking. I'm it's a pretty good run of being at peak creativity. Then we get into so-called flow states and great branding, sir, like the situation from Jersey Shore. Thanks. Well played, flow state. But the ability to utilize those early morning or when one first awakens after a period of sleep. Let's be specific. It seems like the being can more easily access a creative state, which can and I say is in some ways associated with a theta brainwave state, so called. If y'all are familiar with these topics, so um, maybe I've done some training of the mind where I'm somewhat able to, while not fully extend an actual theta state, at least to sort of maximize it, and then you know, maybe stay on the side of alpha that's or beta, I think we end up in eventually. But yeah, even if I can stay calm and relaxed and whatever's not theta but's closest to theta, right on that side. Um, the delta brainwave entrainment certainly made a huge impact on me back in the day, being able to get restful sleep, especially for the brain specifically, especially if somebody might have actually be experiencing, maybe disconnectedness, disorientation, dissociation, but not in a beneficial sense. Because there are benefits to there can be, I should say. It's very interesting to be a being in this realm with operating via these psychologies uh, that as we may choose to realize are necessarily, at least in part, products of this very system. And especially that seeing that that's become even more cemented in the youth, uh, even by way of comparison to when I was socialized through the formalized public education system in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, right, where we had film strips, so like actual film reels, right? So they would at various times throughout the school year, especially I remember a lot of this in elementary school. There was a dimming of the lights, right? Now I'm already kind of thinking like just that alone could potentially put a child into a suggestible state. I'm assuming I'm actually not formally educated or trained in any of these areas, and I've studied. When I've talked about that, I've read about gender studies, feminism. Like I've read a lot about a lot of topics, but only as pertains to adults. I've read almost nothing about, parenting. Now I know some. I've read some things that, like, let's say, psychology textbooks that reference certain aspects of child development. So I've actually referred to like each child. So let me back up a little bit. When I do interface with those concepts, it tends to be from my own direct experience of having been parented as a child, if that makes sense. So I do tend to keep it specific and related to me, if that makes sense. So, but I've read a little bit about, childhood development and almost nothing about parenting. And you'll almost never hear me say anything that even would come anywhere near, um, approaching something that could credibly be, construed as representing, like, oh, here's how one should or could parent. Well, I don't know anything about it. Um, yeah, just not my thing at all. Yeah, exactly. Caffeine, very lots of confusion around caffeine. I think I do better overall with it. In some ways, I think my mood can be worse, but I'm starting to see that for me. And this is what I was trying to kind of get to. So thank you for reminding me about the coffee there, Jay Hyten. Is that I think I do better, especially if I wake up, that early, and then I'm actually up and trying to do stuff like before 1 a.m. So I'm up and around by like 12:45. So 00:45, right? But I've had something that could represent an actual night's sleep, believe it or not. And I don't know if y'all ever heard this, but Dick Gregory, and I am a conspiracy theorist, and Dick Gregory, lest we forget, was involved in lots of actual, like official fiction, uh, conspiracy theories. He was even supposedly his claim. Dick Gregory claimed that someone just sent him the Zapruder film, and that, of course, the Zapruder film is, the first time the American people, the public, was shown that specific film of the, what may have been the actual shooting of the president. Although whether or not that was even real, who knows? But I'm not claiming to know. Um, it's interesting. The whole Kennedy thing is very interesting. Uh, lots. The official fiction is just, truth is stranger than fiction, as we might say. But it's kind of backwards in that context. But I think you know what I mean. But I think I'm probably going to have more coffee, actually. So now it's going to be day 3. So now I'm pretty much officially, if I do it today, I'm more or less, um, I'm not committing to do that into perpetuity, but I'm committing to do that at least until these beans are gone, which actually might be a blessing because I'm sick of these beans. Let me go get the beans. The opposite of ADD. I got so fucking focused on the dates, which really, dude, on this low end coffee, it really doesn't fucking matter. I mean, why am I even reading the dates in the first place? But I got so obsessed with looking at the dates. Then they're not necessarily rotated properly either. So something about this appeals to me, right? So um, in that process, I accidentally bought the original, which is terrible. But then they're Colombian, considering the ridiculous, low price range, it's pretty decent, all things considered. I certainly would not have been unhappy with the Colombian. Um, and maybe that's just a placebo. It's the same fucking beans. Who knows? But yeah, even that coffee is, I'm grinding the beans myself. It's still pretty fucking good. So yeah, I think it's coffee time. In fact, it is. Or or is it mealtime? Hmm, interesting. I think it's coffee time, then mealtime. All right, we're back. 25, still in the house. Thank you for your patience. Much appreciated. Yeah, so the moral of the story about the coffee is it seems, I think I had my first 2 cups, 12 ounces. So 12 ounces once, right? I consider that 1 cup. Actually, it's two, as measured in fluid ounces, anyway. This is not about that, however. Let's not get lost in the minutiae. So here I have the pour over. I'm a fan, even with the low quality beans. There's the pour over. Let's see. I don't know if you can see that. Probably can't see any of that. Let's not spill it, sir. Yeah. The grounds. Get this back pulled away. Yeah, it was like 5 hours after I first woke up. That seems to be the spot for the coffee. I think I enjoy that much more. I don't really enjoy that one when I have it. Even if I wait an hour or whatever, like, oh, wait an hour and a half because the cortisol or whatever. Okay, I can do that, but even then, maybe just wait till I think, oh well, I don't have that much to say right now. Well, I drink 12 ounces of coffee and I'll have something to say. Believe that. Good stuff down there in the chat. I see there, y'all are cooking something up down there. Yeah, I'm checked out. I'm on synthetic cannabinoid vacation, or that's my vacation. But I want to say this about Z. If he's taken 1 week off, to me, and maybe it's 10. I don't know. Maybe he's doing a retreat. I don't know what the guy's doing. Maybe he's doing there's been people trying to, prescribe this Vipassana 10-day retreat. I don't know, man. I would probably do it just to, I feel like I don't think it'd be that big of a deal, honestly, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't learn. I would learn things, and it would be cathartic, I'm sure, in some ways. But here's yeah. All right. The tumbler. Oh, I have 2 of these tumblers. I broke one recently. Dang, I hate when that happens. They're good. These are good. These are good. I think these are Walmart or Dollar General. I forget which, but Dollar General's got some decent tumblers at times. But this is probably Walmart. Mm-hmm. Yeah, coffee ain't broken. Even these subpar beans, it's still pretty damn good, I have to say. Uh, the proper pour over, of course, has something to do with it. There you go. The omni powers indeed. You're always glad to see Mr. Thought Experiment in the house, but and then Mr. Unslave seems to be addressing that some of these folks who want to go to Jack's channel, Mr. Talcott's channel, and I'm almost never on his channel. I don't know if y'all know that. I see almost none of that stuff. Now I see it sometimes when Paul's simulcasting or whatever we call that. Yeah, I see some of that, so I definitely see some of Jack's show. I don't see it as I'm just seeing it as that's Paul enslaved over there talking to Talcott, or getting thrown out or whatever. So I ain't over there anyway. But I was somewhat aware of these done. Maybe I didn't realize that it perhaps gotten out of hand, if indeed it did. And then I started to see some spillover into my channel, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, I want to make it clear this is not what this is about over here. We're not kissing his ass, but we're also not just character assassinating either, or I'm not anyway, and I don't really appreciate the folks who were, if they were, and I think they were, and have, and probably will. I don't know. Maybe it's better that I go live, and when I do drop a link, that generally, uh, RT, I guess, was the last one to actually hit the link. Maybe, if I'm remembering correctly. So I figure I'll be able to wrangle Yurt at some point. He ain't scared. And then Provo Kid, um, that was an interesting. When I went on his podcast, if y'all don't know, I'm on the Provo Kid podcast. I was almost the final guest, but he ended up scoring the Machine Lies, I believe. When that I'm going to go listen to. If anybody's a fan of podcasts, which I am, right? It's like it's funny how my own metaversal experiences are certainly shaped in the present time by the medium itself, even back into the McLuhan sense. The medium is the message, and the mass age and the massage, and on and on and on down the line. um, Ad infinitum, would that be correct here? I'm not sure. Unto perpetuity, seemingly. Yeah, coffee up, players. Yeah, it's at a certain point, it's also dry drunk. It's a dry drunk flex, maybe. I don't smoke cigarettes, thank God. Uh, although I will say, man, just um, I don't know. I don't mind smoking. For me, it's never going to be any regular thing. But I do see there's something, there to just smoking in general. But I still, the idea of just, okay, well, now this is a thing we do. But of course, I got there with cannabis. Obviously, I've smoked a lot of, well, and a lot of, you know, literal, make literal again, by the way, but, no hyperbole, actual Mexican brickweed for years, and who knows what ammonia, fucking paraquat, I knew someone who claimed it used to be so dry and hard and compressed. Some of it he would pour Pepsi on it, and not even to try to make it weigh more necessarily, just try to sort of bring it back to life in a way. And um, apparently, that's not that bad of flour before they almost entirely ruin it by compressing it, from what I understand. Some of my favorite flour's always been like right around 15% THC. Have always that's been what I've done. And I'll be able to smoke it all day, every day, pretty much. It's not. Oh well, this we've got the 35% or whatever. It's like I actually don't even like that stuff most of the time. Uh, I'd rather have the more what we might call Reggie now. Even 13%, 12%. Some of that stuff. It's like, oh yeah, well, whoever grew it, something something happened somewhere. But even some of that's enjoyable. Yeah, I'm not. I like it all to some extent. Uh, Definitely would consider myself something of a. I don't know if connoisseur exactly would be the term, but I've I'm grateful that I've been blessed to, especially just to be able to have those experiences with cannabis. Yeah, it's been quite beneficial, I must say, and not in a medical or a patient sense. Just I've benefited greatly. The psychoactivity is, and so is anybody surprised that like a moth to a flame, I'm more or less experiencing some version of a love affair with this THCO. With it perhaps being, other than actual edibles, the most seems like the most psychoactive. It's certainly the most I've had. They say that THCP is very, the THCP is supposed to be very, very psychoactive as well. Maybe even more than this, but shorter duration potentially. I'm amazed at, because I keep saying that my tolerance is, been ruined, but I'm still getting freaking baked. It's crazy. What do you think, man? Is this even real, man? Are these even real synthetics cannabinoids? And yes, I did say real synthetic. Are these even actual synthetic cannabinoids? Whatever China shipped over that month. But bro, uh, it's going to be a high priority. I want to secure some kind of supply of this stuff, but do it legally. So my state's out of the question. Arkansas has already put the kibosh on it, but I want to get some actual. I think I'm going to eschew the D9, but the feds have claimed that as far as they're concerned, THCO period is Schedule 1. So then you get into, well, why not go for the Delta 9? But I don't know. Your thoughts, those listening, if at all? There you go, Jay Hyten. I like the way you said that, Jay Hyten. Cannabis also saved my life. It gives me the ability to ignore stupid. Well, yeah. There's always that, sir. There's always that. Lots of, yep. This, anyway, I want to show this too, since we're talking, since we're just shooting the shit. And Tommy's right. As much as I say that I don't like small talk, I do just shoot the shit on a regular basis. I recognize that, Tom. That's okay if you want to come hold me accountable. But, or we could just be metaversal friends, maybe. This is I'm not even going to be able to show it, actually. Shout out to my new keyboard that I complained about. I actually like it now that I'm somewhat used to it. I don't know if I told you all that. Oh, and this is the glass is in the danger zone. Do not break. Be careful, sir. Yeah, this is just more or less just the digestion, but like 3 of those bottles are about to be empty and are redundant. But that's pretty close to. There's a couple of things that I'm definitely going to keep taking on a daily basis. Will slide right in. So that's pretty much the size of like what I would consider pretty close to my bare bones minimum. Although there's probably still a couple more things I'm going to be trying to carry with me. So now I'm almost already just necessitating a vehicle, right? And then, what a bad decision on this Versa, only because of the manual, and not even that I wore the thing out. It's just, I'm realizing now it's just, dude, nobody really works on these things anymore, and especially in an econo box. Now the ones that are manuals, it's all higher end stuff where it's people who want to put the money into it, or it's all under warranty. A lot of that stuff, the cars are so good now. It's like, yeah, it's a manual. It's got this certain style of clutch, but like Audi, when my dad had that Audi TT Roadster, they warranted every bit of that as long as it wasn't, excessively abused or whatever. Now I will take the L for just driving intentionally in a way that wore it out. But if it's the original one, it's time for it to be worn out. If that makes, we're at 80,000 miles. We're at 80,000. It's supposed to be worn out. So yeah, I certainly hastened its demise, and I know how to drive. I can keep driving it for the time being, but I'm having trouble summoning the motivation to actually get the issues addressed, so that she will be roadworthy. Yeah, life's too short for tech nightmares. I've spent years in tech nightmares. To some extent, choosing to earn my living and not making much money ever. Never made more than 30 grand. And that was a salaried position. So, that I was allowing myself to be exploited based on the amount of hours I was putting in, certainly. Although there was a lot of downtime in that job. But yeah, there you go. Oh, he got it. They hacked his account. Oh, that's fucked up, dude. I'm sorry to hear that. Damn, dude, that's horrible. Yeah, it's at a certain point. That's why I don't have a Walmart money card anymore. Somebody jacked my actual account, not my debit card number. They jacked my friggin' account number and my routing info and everything, and kept trying to do fraudulent purchases. But I was able to thwart their attempts to charge onto my account, but because I got a notification, just immediately fucking shut everything down and went and just withdrew like almost all the money, as much as they'd let me get out anyway, and then came back for the rest probably. But it's my money and I want it now. Yeah, man, that's fucked up, dude, and that's happened a lot. I don't know if you know that, but like, so now with so many of these online sites wanting to do this two-factor authentication. Like, the reality is, I know when Mint Mobile, their information got compromised, and then they're on the T-Mobile network, and T-Mobile's actually bought Mint Mobile. I don't know if y'all know that. Um, I think it was T-Mobile. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, dude, it's crazy, man. You're. This is from the movie Brazil by Terry Gilliam. There's a certain scene where Robert De Niro's in the movie, and he's like a young Robert De Niro, though, young. He's like playing a technician, a system technician, and he just sort of shows up on an ad hoc grassroots basis, right, getting in where he fits in, and he just knows exactly how to fix this dude's apartment in the zombie apocalypse, fucking post-apocalyptic landscape, um, um, futuristic, but in the 80s. So that's an interesting scene. I'd like to be able to play that on here, actually. But we know that the format is not really set up for that. But I'd like to be able to play that scene. It's interesting. But at a certain point, he shows up and just sort of, in a brash, bravado, over the top, way, like fixes whatever was wrong with the apartment. Because the apparatchiks had been out there, and it was all, well, this is not in order, and that's not in order, and we got to bring you up to code over here before we can do this over there. And well, eventually, just De Niro shows up in the fucking, under cover of night and just fixes it. Of course, the apparatchiks come back, and now they're like, well, who did this? This is unauthorized repairs, and they're like pulling it out, right? They're pulling out the new, the fix. Like, on some level, that is what it is. That is like what it is to exist within this system, and that's how I think of what Music Holds the Secret's going through. At a certain point, to me, it's just like, fuck it, I'll just go get, and this is not exactly true, but you know that's where paying more for something like Verizon, I'm not saying that they wouldn't, they might be less likely to get hacked or whatever, but they've all been hacked as far as I can tell. But maybe they're a little more effective at dealing with it. Maybe they're not, but it's not going to be pleasant with any of them, certainly. Hmm. So I was looking at this two-factor authentication and realizing that the true fact is, someone could, if they stole my account information, they absolutely could spoof my SIM or whatever. Like, they can absolutely go on the network under my number. Like, there's no question about that. So, which makes people way more hackable, right? So, and I'm not blaming the victim. Like, who knows if or what Music Holds a Secret could now do or could have done to prevent this, or what happened. The reality is, we, meaning individually, are all susceptible to versions of this, in our own ways, right? And then it comes down to probably some just wrong place at the wrong time, right? It's unfortunate, man, that this is what the Babylon system is to some extent. Um, and no, Robert Escobar show, we or you or the Green Party are not going to make any of that better. And how dare you imply that it's somehow okay or good as it is, when it's nothing of the sort, sir. Oh yeah, see that exactly. That's rogue apps. Yep. hmm Yeah, I could shore up my defenses in that regard myself. Now to think about it, not in a paranoid way, just in a, let me mind my own business a little more effectively. But I've done pretty well historically over time. But it can happen to any of us. My Yahoo got hacked at a certain point. My Yahoo email, and it was quite the undertaking to get that back. Now I've since, I know they never truly delete the account, but I've done whatever I could do to delete, whatever they tell me they'll do to delete the account, because I disagreed with some of their terms of service. Meanwhile, because they changed them and updated them, and I took my stand there. That was my hill to die on. Meanwhile, whatever I've agreed to, although not necessarily, I do think Proton Mail, as much as people want to try to say it's garbage, it's all garbage. Yeah, Proton Mail is garbage, and all email is to some extent. And that, as far as the free, what can I go sign up for? I'd say it's less bad than the other ones. Okay, so let me use my own negative, context, against my own self. So yeah, it's also not a good thing. Oh, Proton Mail is great. No, it's not. is probably slightly less bad than the other ones. Yeah, man. I'm sorry you're going through that, man. That sucks. And again, I've had my own versions of would be self-inflicted or just choosing to have 3 PCs that I would just, always changing the hardware around, always installing new drivers, always looking for, well, what? Oh, we got a truckload of monitors, at the computer warehouse that I was working at, and eventually ended up with a couple of 21-inch Trinitrons, as I recall. Great fucking monitors, but heavy, of course, but bulky and heavy. But yeah, great fucking monitors. And part of me misses that old 4x3, but these 214s seems pretty ideal. The 16:9 aspect ratio, the 214-inch portables, right? But yeah, man, that sucks, dude. And just what a blessing, that's my basis for compassion for Music Holds a Secret, as well as just like my own. It's like, thank God, there, but for the grace of God goes I, right? Better you than me. I don't know that that's true. But of course, the one on the right, I just leave it off unless I'm actually using it. But yeah, of course, we've showed all that many times. But I'm happy I worked the old DAC in. That's it's nice to have this. I got a separate. That volume is just what I hear in my headphones. So that's been a game changer in a way, adding that element. Although I have to remember sometimes that I might have y'all up too high, like especially if I'm actually able to do a screen share. I might have y'all up too high, or the screen share is not up high enough, or whatever. But I'm turned up in my own cans, so I'm learning. Again, Benton School of Broadcasting. Yeah, in India, exactly. And sometimes I'll just like, look, I'm no offense, but I don't. Can you please get somebody else? I don't know. I just don't know what you're saying. Like I've done that too, but I do everything I can to sort of hang in there with them. But at a certain point, you're just like, this ain't going to happen. And I've done enough customer service. I remember Christos was kind of laughing at me one day just because of how I think the phrasing when I was talking to Highly Suspect was like, dude, I've been tech support. I know how to just get in there, fucking hit them with the request, and then just they're either going to do it or they're not. And then maybe they'll ask a question like, oh, do you mean this or that, right? And then having to respond to that very specifically, right? And just trying to maneuver them to the appropriate, finally click the thing, right? Fascinating, silly humans. Yeah. Funny how hackers don't have to prove anything, but you have to prove everything to undo their mess. Yeah, of course. That's exactly how it works. Just like when I was homeless, and sometimes these people would show up and sow fucking mischief and discontent and cause problems, while us, responsible, arguably, or you know, people who are at least attempting to practice, being responsible, we're all in line for something free, or maybe it's bus passes or and a meal or whatever, sack lunch, whatever it is. So we're kind of hanging out, and then here come a miscreant, and what the miscreant does is they sow fucking chaos and discontent, and then they leave, so that now the people come outside and they're sort of wanting to give us a lecture. And then I'm just like, hey, well, respectfully, like those people aren't here anymore. Like you're just telling the people who we don't do any of that. Like you're actually correcting the responsible people, which, yeah, I understand that that's frustrating for y'all, but like, please understand they've left, that they don't stick around for the lecture. So you're giving that to us. We're good. And I've had that actually somewhat well received at times, believe it or not. Um, Somewhat counterintuitively, perhaps. Broadcast will certainly wrap by noon. Mhm. If not, well before. I feel like we're sort of in the home stretch. Actually, I feel like this, now that I think about it. Broadcast, not that one. Broadcast has ended. Broadcast continues nearly unabated, and unabated, of course, misspelled. But yeah, that with 17 in the house, I think is more or less where we are. Boy, I've been rambling for a minute, boy. I don't even, what have I even been talking about? Talking about a flow state stream of consciousness. That was, I don't know where I went, but I have not been here for quite some time. Where did I go? Wherefore art thou, Romeo? Goodness gracious. Sakes alive. Mighty white of you, Mr. Benton. Press 3 for carne asada, indeed. Yeah, proper West Coast tacos, by the way. Certainly, Texas also proper authentic tacos, but lest we forget. But yeah, even Austin, you can get actual fucking tacos. But so I don't want to hear it, SoCal. But yeah, outside of Texas, certainly not in Arkansas. There's just effectively no proper authentic tacos or authentic style. It's not even authentic; it's a style. Lest we forget. But, you know what I mean, certainly. How could you not? Interesting, Terry Miller. Yeah, that was Mr. Krishnamurti's assertion, and yeah, I personally would not be willing to put much energy or effort into refuting your notion here. So I would tend to sort of let that stand until challenged or refuted, because I do tend to lose. I just sort of lose interest in putting my energies into. But yeah, certainly, I wouldn't want people to believe that I'm asserting that Krishnamurti is in fact correct. I appreciate the perspective, certainly, and I enjoy the thought experiment aspects in such ideas. But I would see why some folks might just assume that of course, Benton agrees with this, and I certainly relate. I relate to the concept, absolutely. I feel some form of attachment, but then. Um, Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, to be sure. Interesting guy too. The official fiction version of whatever psyops comprised, whoever that being may have been. But pray for Music Hole's a Secret and his cell service here. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, good thing the Mexicans are everywhere now. I can always get a decent taco. That's true. Well, in Oregon, actually, I went to a place that had, authentic style tacos, which is certainly not authentic, but not Southwest Tex-Mex, to be sure. Because Arkansans, they will serve you cheese dip if that's what you communicate to them that you want to purchase. So just be aware of that. Doesn't mean they eat the cheese dip, folks. Doesn't mean they don't eat the cheese dip either. That's probably more of a person-to-person basis, I assume. Um, Arkansas apparently is known for cheese dip above all else, as far as at the level of culinary. What have they more or less? What has a cheese dip? Fucking no wonder everybody's obese. Well, except for the meth heads, of course. Yeah, no decent tacos in the whole land. That's probably true. The whole land of Colorado. Probably get some fry bread though here and there, I reckon. What do you think? Perhaps. I do like thinking about different areas of the country and what they have to offer. New Mexico is certainly an interesting place, but not a huge fan of how the state government's choosing to conduct its affairs in many regards. But certainly interesting folks in some of the areas. I certainly have not explored the entirety of the state, and much of my uh, what I know of New Mexico would be near an interstate, certainly, but not necessarily. I could tell traveling stories, I guess. was veering off into that territory earlier. Not really sure. Am I taking requests now from the audience? Perhaps is it the request line? Oh well, certainly this needs to be in place, lest we forget. And Tommy, I think Tommy kind of hit on it in his own way when he was there was almost a dynamic. And again, I would try to play this for you folks, but it's on proper instruction motivates people. It's the moose is broken bad yet again from last night. But it's if I try to do it, my connection will take a poop 100% of the time. So I'm not even going to attempt it. But yeah, definitely some interesting dynamics at play in that broadcast. Almost Paul sort of inviting Tommy in almost as like a counselor in a way, or at least open to hearing Tommy's point of view, or seemingly, right? Seemingly open to hearing Tommy's, but then also, sort of sticking to his guns, even in defense of his own. Because Tommy will, I don't know if y'all have noticed, but Tommy's seems to very cleverly uh, look for an opportunity to sort of slip something in here and there, sort of questioning somebody's credibility, or maybe an inconsistency in how they've behaved and communicated over time. He's certainly done it with me some of the time, and I've seen him similarly behaved in some of his interactions with Mr. Unslaved. So, um, yeah, I'm fascinated by such dynamics to some extent. Um, Thankful. I see what you're doing here. I do believe that now something's been taking. I'm diminished, or something somehow been. Now I'm experiencing a deprivation. Right, that seems to be a common trap that many people fall into psychologically. Like I'm not going to choose to view things in that regard. Uh, Probably ever. But certainly it'll be very limited in the first place. Version of, I guess, like a AutoZone local parts store. It was delicious, and $1 indeed represented an excellent value. So could have eaten three, to be sure, but it was for $1. It was quite a meal. And I'm not kidding or exaggerating when I probably would spend at least half the year in Mexico. Certainly if I was still completely, you know, capable of working 6 months, 6 straight months. There was a time not that long ago when I and fulfilled in many ways, living 6 months out of the year in Mexico, and the other six able to save money and all of these things, right? Thought is not good, as we see. Having trouble connecting. Benton channel. Um, and I've chosen not to take that personally, but yeah, it's a thing. Now, it could be. Yeah, Blueberry Tom has the answers to life tough questions. That's right. And again, very selfishly, I want to see Paul Enslaved and Tommy. I want to see them at their best. In some sort of collaboratively making content, if that's a thing that they choose to do and are able to do, and manage to find it expedient and pull it off, right, in some regard. I would like to see it. So there's always that. I'm wondering, I must be tearing up this floor to some extent with this chair. Yeah, food's a big one. Portland, lots of excellent. That's in fact when I discovered my love for the kebab, and more specifically beef and lamb kebabs, or like halal. Is that a thing? That's like a style of cuisine, or um, I'm not that worldly in some of these regards, so please bear with me, folks. But lots of excellent, fairly affordable, especially back then, Portland food carts. Oh, and I do remember having launched into some sort of discussion of various areas of the country, and I was trying to draw some distinctions between pre-pandemic Portland. Oh, I think I finished all that. Yeah, I finished all that up. Gosh, I leave so many, so many paths unexplored. Sometimes it's like I just assumed that I failed. Paul Enslaved is a vague Don Rickles kind of style. He's very humorous and clever and quick, certainly. Um, Fast on his feet, as it were. Not Mr. Furley himself, or yeah, Don Rickles. Oh, I'm thinking. I'm thinking of another person. See how my brain does that? My brain went to Mr. Furley, who was Don Knotts, interesting version of a. Although there's probably a video. It's probably a video podcast now that I think about it, but may not be. Provo Kid, um, who's now apparently been retired, but yeah, Provo Kid with talking to the machine lies. Yeah, I haven't quite taken that one in yet, but I think it's time for me to enjoy this other half of this meal. So I think we might call it at 3:33. Might call it here at 3:33. It's 9:24 in the morning. I've had my second cup of coffee. It's per 1 ounce per hour, right? There's got to be some balance in that. Yeah. Oh yeah, we already covered that, Mr. Miller. Yeah, we're pretty much done here as far as I can tell. What do y'all think? Wrap it up. Stick a fork in us. We're done. Oh, we found out about Z. He is in fact on some version of a content vacation, at least. Yeah, at least from my perspective. Um, and only really show on my side, on the StreamYard side. Tom wanted me to do some version of that one day, and I almost did, but I was like, it's destruct. Yeah, that's enough, man. That's enough. It's enough. It's enough content for today. It's the right amount of content, I think. That would hypothetically still leave time in the day for whatever needed to be done behind the scenes. Maybe as much as I say I want somebody else to do the editing, maybe a little bit of action. Not on this connection. I'm thinking mail the SD cards one at a time. Have enough SD cards for have 10 of them. If I had 10 SD cards, I could mail them 5 at a time. uh, to some version of a video editor, or at least a. Oh, I missed it. No, it's